Chapter 1125. Looking at the contents of the telegram in his hand, Yang Chendong's eyes flashed with a sharp light. In his heart, he had sentenced Rong Shao to death. All along, Yang Chendong had a natural closeness to the Han people. Even though they were both merchants, the treatment of the Han merchants was much better. Whether it was the price of goods or the ratio, it was much higher than that of the foreign races. For this reason, many people had raised objections, but he had ignored them. It could be said that this policy had allowed many Han merchants to earn a lot of money, and Yang Chendong's reputation had always been very good. However, when the forest was big, there were all kinds of birds. There were still some people who were not satisfied. They even secretly went against Yang Chendong. Rong Shao was a typical representative of this. Of course, without Rong Shao, there would still be Wang Shao and Li Shao. However, who told him to run into the muzzle of the gun? If he did not punish this person, such things would inevitably happen again in the future. In order to achieve the effect of killing one to appease the 100, Rong Shao had already been put on the death list. Putting Rong Shao's matter aside, Yang Chendong needed to consider and judge the situation of the new second army that was surrounded and what the truth was. Even though before this telegram, Shirbi had already sent a telegram and told him everything. However, when a general was outside, military orders could not be given. Who could guarantee that what Shirbi said was true and not a ploy to stall for time and not just to brush him off? It was still the same saying, loyalty depended on the bargaining chip. At least for now, Yang Chendong couldn't give up anything. Even if he could, before the crisis was resolved, it was just an illusion. It was just an empty check. Whether Shirbi could be trusted or not was a problem that Yang Chendong had to consider. If he made a mistake in his judgment, everything that followed would be useless. Yang Chendong thought about the first time they met and how he had promoted the other party to a commander. He felt that he had done enough and was sincere enough. Feeling that he had not done anything wrong, Yang Chendong raised his eyebrows and said in his heart, I have done what should be done. Next, let's bet that my judgment of people is not wrong. I hope you can withstand the test. Yang Chendong, who seemed to have made a decision in his heart, called Beta Persei. He wanted to send a telegram to Tiger's Mane of the new First Army to ask him to pay more attention to Shirbi's situation. At the same time, he had to prepare for the city defense battle now. Although the new Second Army's matter was big, it was far away and there was nothing he could do. However, the problem of the Japanese army in front of him was something that needed to be solved. If he got stuck in this quagmire, he was afraid that it would not only be the new Second Army that would have problems, but more problems would appear. After seeing Beta Persei return after sending the telegram, Yang Chendong asked, how's the situation in Nanhai province? Young master, the people who moved out are moving in, but the area there is not small. It will take at least a month to distribute the land and restore order. Beta Persei reported in a deep voice. Okay. Yang Chendong nodded to show that he knew, and then asked, which army is responsible for the cleanup work? Young master, it's under the command of Commander Nyo Duo. Okay, order Nyo Duo to take a boat to Ping and Beijing quickly. By the way, send a telegram to the Security Bureau in Baiming's Kyoto. When Yang Chendong said this, a murderous intent flashed in his eyes. Obviously, the matter of the new Second Army made him a little angry, and he was ready to start a massacre. Baiming's Imperial Palace. Acting Sect Master Zhu Qiyu was in a good mood recently. It was all because of the news that came from the grassland that Rong Shao had already convinced the commander of the new Second Army of the 5-Star Army, Shi Biao. In 20 days, they might raise their army and surrender. If that was the case, he would not have to pay any price to gain an extra army of troops. Comparing the two, he would have a greater advantage in suppressing the 5-Star Army's forces. Once the Great Ming Empire suffered heavy losses and finally dealt with the 5-Star Army, he would lead a strong army to the south to solve the problem of the South Ming Empire. If he could also solve the problem of the South Ming Empire, then the great Ming Empire would regain its former glory in his hands. Thinking about how great of a feat this would be, it was really exciting. Just as he was in a good mood, Chief Eunuch Jining appeared. "Your Majesty, the Crown Prince's junior tutor Su Yozhen said that he has an urgent matter to discuss with you. What do you think?" "Oh, send him in." Hearing that Su Yozhen had come, Jining nodded. He admired this official who could do things. Not long after, Su Yozhen appeared in the main hall of the imperial palace. He first knelt and kowtowed, and then he stood up with a serious expression. "Beloved official Su, you don't look too well. May I know why you've come?" Zhu Qiyu asked in a nonchalant manner. "Your Majesty, this official has come for a matter related to Baiming's reputation. I really have to say it." Seeing how solemn Su Yozhen was, Zhu Qiyu, who was sitting on the dragon throne, also straightened his body and asked, "What's the matter?" "Yes, Your Majesty." Su Yozhen held the ceremonial tablet and said, "Your Majesty, this official has come to ask for forgiveness." "What's going on?" Zhu Qiyu, who was confused by these words, asked. "Your Majesty, it's like this. Previously, when the Japanese Empire asked for help, this official spoke out in court to stop it. At that time, I didn't do anything wrong. After all, the most important thing in court right now is to solve the problem of the grasslands and achieve the goal of dealing a heavy blow to the 5-star army. But now, it seems that this official's vision was a bit short-sighted." Su Yozhen said with an apologetic attitude. "Why do you say that?" Zhu Qiyu was a bit stunned. He had already put the matter of the Japanese Empire's request for help to the back of his mind. He really didn't think that Su Yozhen would bring it up again. Su Yozhen was naturally instructed by Yang Chendong to come. Before he came, he had already thought of the words to say. He immediately said, "Your Majesty, this official has not thought things through." After a self-reflection, he continued, "Ever since the Japanese Empire sent people to ask for help, there have been all kinds of rumors. But most of them are accusing us of not helping our vassal state. Especially the people from the Wara Empire stationed in the capital. They have mentioned this matter more than once in public. The Japanese Empire was a vassal state of the Great Ming Empire. Now that they were in danger, Baiming chose to not help them. Thinking about it, as the current Baiming's partner, how could Yeshen of the Wara not have any thoughts? If this matter was not handled well, it would greatly affect the cooperation between the two sides. Su Yozhen used this as an excuse to speak out. It couldn't be more appropriate. After listening to this, Zhu Qiyu couldn't help but frown. Although Baiming was not as good as it used to be, and even the surrounding vassal states were almost devoured by the 5-star army, he had to consider the feelings of the other party. He didn't expect that the Japanese Empire's matter would attract the attention of Yang Chendong of the Wara. Now that they were cooperating, Zhu Qiyu, who didn't want to make things worse, immediately asked Su Yozhen, "Su Yozhen, if this is the case, do you have any ideas?" "Your Majesty, I have a plan that can shut the mouth of the Wara with the smallest price." Hearing that he was finally asked, Su Yozhen answered without hesitation. "Speak." "Yes. I think we should send an army to the Japanese Empire to show that Baiming will not give up on our vassal states. As for this army, there doesn't need to be too many people, it's mainly for show. If there is any danger, then retreat immediately. That way, no one will be able to say anything." "Which army?" Zhu Qiyu asked with interest. "Your Majesty, didn't you just set up a navy? There are only 50,000 people, which is neither more nor less. Let them go to the periphery of Neon and they can test the army. It's the best of both worlds." Su Yozhen replied with a smile on her face after she finally expressed her thoughts. Since the 5-star army has been growing, especially after they first took down North Korea and then attacked the Japanese Empire, the safety of the sea has also attracted Zhu Qiyu's attention. He spent a lot of money to build a 50,000-person navy, and at the same time lifted the ban on the sea. He was ready to build something on the sea. In Zhu Qiyu's opinion, even if they can't dominate the sea like the 5-star army, they should at least have the power to protect themselves and have their own voice. Therefore, this 50,000-person navy was established, and the people chosen were all people who were excellent in the water. It took a lot of effort. This 50,000-person navy can be called the prototype of the Baiming Navy. Once it is done, it will continue to grow. Therefore, when he heard that he was going to send this precious army to the battlefield of the Japanese Empire, Zhu Qiyu was a little against it. Su Yozhen saw that Zhu Qiyu didn't make a decision immediately, so she knew what the other party was thinking. She continued to say, "Your Majesty, from a weak army to a strong army, it has to go through all kinds of training. This trip to the Japanese Empire is one of them. Besides, if things go wrong, we can withdraw in time. Just treat it as a training at sea. We can use this opportunity to shut the mouths of others. Isn't it a good thing?" Zhu Qiyu thought about it carefully and felt that there was a certain degree of truth, so he nodded. "Good, since that's the case, I will discuss it with the officials of the Ministry of War." Zhu Qiyu said this, which meant that he agreed. It was not the late period of the Great Ming Dynasty, and now the imperial power was still relatively unified. Especially in the use of the army, they had the power to keep their word. Shi City. Yang Chendong sent a telegram. There were not many words, and it could even be said that there was only one sentence: "Observe closely, prepare to defend the city, and act at your discretion during special times." The so-called act at your discretion was equivalent to giving all the power to Tiger's Mane. This was a trust, but at the same time, it was also a pressure. Chapter 1126. It was conceivable that if the matter was not resolved properly, Tiger's Mane would inevitably be blamed by others. However, at this time, Tiger's Mane could no longer care so much because he had received accurate information that the Baiming emissary had begun to negotiate with them. They had agreed to make a final decision within 20 days at the latest. Now, it seemed that there were only 17 days left. It was naturally Rong Xiao who took the initiative to be able to obtain accurate information. He deliberately opened a hole in the siege and allowed a group of people from Shajing City to walk out. As expected, there were intelligence personnel from the 5th Star Army among them. As soon as he received the news, Tiger's Mane called Yuan and Yangxi. The three of them discussed together how to deal with the complicated situation that could change at any time. The three of them first listened to the report of the intelligence personnel who had escaped from Shajing City. When they learned that their people had seen the merchant Rong Xiao appear in the residence of the northern Ming emissary with their own eyes, and when they saw him being escorted out with a smile, the three of their faces turned somewhat ugly. The one who had the most intense reaction was Yangxi. He suddenly slammed the table and reprimanded loudly, "What does this Baiming want to do? To think that the young master trusts him so much. He actually dares to collude with foreign enemies and rebel. This is really intolerable." "That's right. I didn't expect him to be such a person." Yuan quickly agreed. At the same time, he also looked very angry. Tiger's Mane's expression was not much better, but he knew that this was not the key point now. Once the new Second Army really joined Baiming, then the first city would become the next target. With the supply completely cut off, how to deal with this complicated situation was what he needed to consider. As for other matters, regardless of whether it was true or not, the sixth young master would naturally deal with it. "Both of you, calm down first. Let's think about our own problems first. Once the two cities of Shajing and Jing province are obtained by Baiming, they will have nothing to worry about. The next step is to send troops to the beginning city. At that time, do the two of you have any countermeasures?" Listening to Tiger's Mane's words, Yangxi replied without hesitation, "What else is there to think about? Of course, we'll deal with whatever comes our way. Our beginning city is not like Shajing City and the other two cities. We're heavily guarded here, and we also have a united army and people. We're not afraid of any enemy's invasion. Yes. Our beginning city is not afraid of any enemy. Let's just fight. Yu Mian's heroic spirit seemed to have been aroused at this moment. His voice was like a bell as he spoke. All right. This was what Tiger's Mane wanted. As long as everyone had the same attitude and cooperated with each other, there was nothing that couldn't be done. There was no enemy that couldn't be defeated. Just as the situation on the grassland became very complicated, the war on the battlefield of the Japanese Empire was in full swing. After Yang Qindong issued the order for a general counterattack, more than 200,000 soldiers of the 5-star army launched a crazy counterattack. In addition to the cooperation of more than 100,000 soldiers of Sensei Naganobu and Fukada Tani, their total strength had surpassed the troops of Supreme General Ashikaga Yoshimasa. Having more troops than the other party did not mean that they would definitely win. However, the strength of the morale of the army and the strength of their combat power were enough to show that the scales of victory and defeat had tilted greatly. After the army left Ping and Beijing, they went straight to the north and came to the Dongshan Road. They separately conquered Jinjiang County, Mino County, Shindu County, and other places. They directly suppressed Ashikaga Yoshimasa's troops in the Musashi area of the Donghai Road. On the sea, President Kuroda's 300,000 soldiers broke through the encirclement. Although they had the advantage in terms of military strength, in the face of the powerful artillery of the C-4th Division and the C-5th Division, they fled all the way. When the 300,000 soldiers entered the Dongshan Road, there were only 100,000 soldiers left. On the land, they lost many cities and lost many soldiers. Of the 300,000 soldiers, there were only 100,000 left. Under such a situation, Ashikaga Yoshimasa, who originally had millions of soldiers, only had 200,000 soldiers left. The reduction in his strength made him anxious every day. While he cursed the 5-star army for being arrogant, he also made preparations to abandon his homeland and leave the Japanese Empire. Compared to the Japanese Empire's continuous losses, the 5-star army was like an unstoppable hurricane. Wherever they went, they would not hesitate to kill anyone who resisted. Along the way, who knew how much blood they had shed? In the end, the forces that opposed the 5-star army were all in danger. Most of them had no choice but to surrender, while a small number of them fled. Based on the current situation, in at most 3 months, the entire Japanese Empire would be conquered by the 5-star army. After taking half a year to migrate and exchange people, it was inevitable that Japan would become another province under the 5-star army. However, at this time, a telegram suddenly appeared. At the same time, the 1st Cavalry Division, New Army, and the 4th Division were all transferred back to Ping and Beijing. When the telegram was sent out, all of the generals on the front lines who received the news were confused. Seeing that victory was right in front of them, they did not know why such an order would appear. Although the 5-star army had over 300,000 soldiers, the only ones that could fight were the 4th Division, the 7th Army, the 1st Cavalry Division, the New Army, and the 1st Reserve Division. The rest of the soldiers, such as the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th Divisions, as well as the hundreds of thousands of miscellaneous Japanese soldiers, were left behind to pick up the leftovers. Many of them were even cleaning up the battlefield. Now that 3 powerful armies were suddenly transferred away, it was inevitable that the generals would have all sorts of guesses. However, no matter what thoughts they had, this telegram was personally sent out by Yang Qindong. Just based on this point, no one dared to disobey. After being surprised for a moment, the 3 armies packed up and stopped moving forward. Then, within 8 hours, they began to change direction, going from north to south to Ping and Beijing. This was the military order of the 5-star army. Once an order was given, regardless of the situation, it must be obeyed. This was also something that Yang Xie's generals had to do. In the blink of an eye, the 3 powerful armies left. Although the total number of soldiers was not large, only around 50,000, it was still a big blow to the morale of the army. The 7th Army's commander, Tian Su, took the initiative to look for the 1st Reserve Division's commander. Su Kuda was also a division commander, and the 1st Reserve Division's soldiers were 30,000, far more than the 7th Army's 10,000 soldiers. However, Su Kuda gave Tian Su enough respect. After all, he was a member of the Cold Front series, fully equipped with firearms. "Commander Tian, please have a seat." In the face of Tian Su's visit, Su Kuda did not dare to be negligent and took the initiative to walk out of the tent to welcome him. "Commander Su is too polite." Tian Su had a smile on his face. He was very satisfied with Su Kuda's attitude. Since Su Kuda was so polite, he naturally would not refuse. Instead, he took the initiative to slow down his pace, trying to keep up with Su Kuda's pace. Everyone else in the tent left. When only the two of them were left, the smiles on their faces involuntarily disappeared. 3 out of 5 powerful armies had left. The two of them felt an enormous pressure. If a problem appeared in their originally sure-win situation because of this, it would mean that the two of them were incompetent. This made them unusually nervous and cautious. They looked at each other. In the end, it was Tian Su who spoke first. "Commander Su, 3 out of 5 powerful armies have left. The pressure on our shoulders will be much greater." "Yes, but we are not afraid," Su Kuda said in a booming voice. "Our 1st Reserve Division has 30,000 soldiers. They are all veterans who have experienced life and death on the battlefield. Although they are not as elite as the Cold Front, we have courage and courage. We are not afraid of any opponent or enemy." "Well said," Tian Su said happily as he waved his fist in the air. "Soldiers should be like this. They should have the courage to press forward. Just like the 6th young master said, when enemies meet on a narrow path, the courageous will win. As long as we are willing to fight with our lives on the line, we can defeat even the heavens and the earth." "Ha ha ha, Commander Su's words are very much to my liking," Su Kuda laughed heartily. With a good start, the rest of the conversation became much easier. As the two of them continued to talk, they quickly reached a consensus on how to fight the next battle. One by one, they came up with a military plan. As for Ashikaga Yoshimasa, who was preparing to leave Musashi Prefecture, he was sighing in sorrow. He was sitting on a chair and sighing with grief. He really couldn't understand. This was clearly his home ground, and he had close to 1 million soldiers. How could he be defeated by a mere 200,000 5-star soldiers? But now, the enemy's numbers were increasing as they fought. Why was he getting weaker and weaker? What was the reason for this? Was it simply because the enemy's weapons were too powerful? Even now, Ashikaga Yoshimasa still didn't know what it meant to win the hearts of the people. He thought that power was a high and mighty thing. As long as he grasped it tightly, he could do whatever he wanted. However, he did not know who gave him power. When a person with power did not use it to serve the people, he would not be far from death. Just as he was sighing, the sound of footsteps suddenly came from outside the tent. Then, a happy Maori regularization appeared and shouted, "Great General, good news, good news." "Good news? What good news can there be at a time like this?" Ashikaga Yoshimasa said disapprovingly. In his opinion, the battle was already decided. He even had to leave his homeland. He really did not know what good news there was to be happy about. Maori regularization did not care so much. He took the report from the frontline scouts and stood in front of Ashikaga Yoshimasa. He said excitedly, "Great General, I just received news that the 5-star army has withdrawn." "What?" Ashikaga Yoshimasa, who originally did not care, suddenly stood up. His eyes were wide open, and he had a look of disbelief. "Say that again." Chapter 1127. "Great General, the 5-star army has retreated. Maori regularization repeated. Retreated? Have they all retreated? Ashikaga Yoshimasa's face flushed red with excitement. No. Maori regularization explained. The 5-star army has only retreated 50,000 soldiers. Originally, Ashikaga Yoshimasa thought that the 5-star army had completely retreated. Now that he heard that only 50,000 soldiers had left, which was less than a quarter of the army, he excitedly sat back down. Then, he said with a dissatisfied tone, out of 200,000 soldiers, only 50,000 have left. Is there a need to be so happy? One must know that he only had 100,000 soldiers on land. Even if the other party retreated 50,000 soldiers, he still did not have the confidence to win. Maori regularization was startled for a moment. Then, he seemed to realize that he had said something wrong. He immediately took the initiative to explain, "Great General, although the 5-star army has only retreated 50,000 soldiers, the ones who left are all elites. There is the 4th Division of the Cold Vanguard Army, the powerful 1st Cavalry Division, and the new army." Oh. When Ashikaga Yoshimasa calmed down and heard that it was these 3 divisions that had left, a hint of joy flashed across his face. However, he quickly regained his composure and said, "At this time, why did these 3 divisions suddenly leave? What is Bugnam of Gojoseon doing?" "I don't know." Maori regularization shook his head. How could he know about such a confidential matter? However, he knew that once these 3 divisions left, the pressure on the battlefield would be greatly reduced. When the opportunity was right, it was not impossible to turn defeat into victory. Although Ashikaga Yoshimasa was very curious about the whereabouts of these 3 divisions, he also knew that now was not the time to ask about it. Since the 5-star army's strength was greatly reduced, he had to consider another matter, which was to turn the situation around. Very good, the 5-star army has suddenly retreated. This is an opportunity for us. Do you really think that we are easy to bully? You actually dare to look down on this great general. At this crucial time, you actually retreated instead of increasing the number of soldiers. Good, then let's show you who's the boss. Mao Lijun, take out the map. At this moment, Ashikaga Yoshimasa's face once again showed his usual domineering expression. He wanted to seize this opportunity to turn the situation around and win the war. If possible, he was afraid that he would even take back everything that he had lost. It was not impossible. After the 2 of them discussed for a while, they finally decided to counterattack and set their target on the Japanese army of the same race. That was the 120,000 Japanese army led by Sensei Naganobu and Fukada Tani. The originally declining Mashikaga Yoshimasa family was just struggling at death's door. Once Ashikaga Yoshimasa took over the military power, the Mashikaga Yoshimasa would not be able to do anything. It would not be long before the Mashikaga Yoshimasa took over some of the families and local forces. It would not be impossible for them to be completely wiped out. However, at this time, the 5-star army appeared, and the war between the Japanese Empire began. The smart and insightful Sensei Naganobu took this opportunity to rise up and finally became the general trend. Now, not only did the Mashikaga Yoshimasa family regain their glory, but the number of soldiers under his command had also reached 80,000. If it was during peacetime, having such an army would be enough to make one a famous general. Even the Supreme General Ashikaga Yoshimasa would not dare to underestimate him. All of this was thanks to Yang Chendong. Especially after seeing the strength of the 5-star army and the advanced weapons, Sensei Naganobu was even more impressed. At the same time, he was prepared to follow Yang Chendong to conquer the world and make contributions. Just like what he usually said when chatting with the other generals of the 5-star army, he only had his eyes on the Japanese Empire. In the end, he was still too short-sighted. He wholeheartedly followed Yang Chendong and waited for the Japanese Empire's war to end. He wanted to see if there was an opportunity to enter Yang Qindong's eyes and then go on a campaign. Suddenly, the situation changed. The 5-star army suddenly withdrew, and 3 strong armies left. This move really caught Sensei Naganabu off guard. Although he did not know where the 5-star army went, he knew that since Yang Qindong gave the order, it must be carried out. However, when his gaze returned to the battlefield, he could not help but worry about his own situation. Ashikaga Yoshimasa was able to be the supreme general of the Japanese Empire for so many years, and even completely take over the imperial power. It was not only because of luck, but also because this person was very capable. Now that such a big hole had appeared on his side, he did not believe that the other party did not notice and would not take any measures. And without the 3 strong armies, would the 5-star army still be able to win against the supreme general with an overwhelming advantage? Sensei Naganabu muttered in his heart. And there was another person who had the same thought, Fukada Tani. Unlike Sensei Naganabu, who took the initiative to join the 5-star army, Fukada Tani was forced to do so by the situation. Before this, he had fought with the 5-star army. Although he lost, he still gave the order to kill the people of the 5-star army. So, even though he was also a general of the Japanese army, compared to the other party, his situation was not just a little bit worse. Originally, he thought that as long as he performed well, and Ashikaga Yoshimasa was destroyed, Bugnam of Gojoseon would be in a good mood, and no one would look into his mistakes. But he did not think that the 5-star army would withdraw 50,000 of their main forces, which made the originally certain victory situation become delicate again. It was now impossible to determine who would win and who would lose. This made Fukada Tani, who was originally nervous, feel a great sense of helplessness. And it was at this time that an old friend suddenly came to the military camp, an old friend that he did not expect. This person was dressed as an ordinary Japanese army soldier. When he suddenly appeared in Fukada Tani's tent, he was really shocked. Maori regularization, why are you here? That's right, the person who came was Maori regularization, the general that Ashikaga Yoshimasa relied on the most. The reason why Maori regularization was able to come here was because of the discussion between him and the general. The two of them wanted to launch a counterattack when the 5-star army's main forces withdrew. But considering that they did not have the advantage in terms of military strength, they decided to start with the 5-star army. If they could find some spies and turn some generals to their own side, the military strength of both sides would have a fundamental change. At that time, winning the battle would not be impossible. After careful consideration, the two of them decided to target Fukada Tani. Although Fukada Tani's rebellion had caused the general to lose a lot of strength. But in this world, there were no eternal enemies, only eternal benefits. In order to achieve his goal, Ashikaga Yoshimasa decided to forgive Fukada Tani and give him a chance. Now that the target was decided, the general had to consider how to proceed. When Maori Masori took the initiative to stand up and express his willingness to accept and complete this mission, Ashikaga Yoshimasa was somewhat unwilling. This was the general that he relied on the most. If something were to happen to him, the loss would be too great. Ashikaga Yoshimasa did not immediately agree, which made Maori regularization feel very touched. Didn't this mean that the other party valued and cared about him? Because of this, he had to do this task well, so he said, "General, this mission has to be done by me. First of all, my identity is important enough. Only if I go can I dispel some of Fukada Tani's concerns and worries. Second of all, if something were to happen, it would be better for me to die than for the general to be in danger. So please agree to my request." It had to be said that Maori regularization's reason was very reasonable. With his status, it was indeed possible for him to prove his side's sincerity. And if Fukada Tani really did not want to betray the 5-star army, taking down Maori regularization would indeed be a great achievement. The only thing that was worrying was that the risk was too high. However, Ashikaga Yoshimasa was a ruthless person after all. In his eyes, power was always the most important thing. Even if Maori regularization was loyal to him, he was just a subordinate that he could use. Since the other party was willing to take the risk and could bring him great benefits, he really had no reason to refuse. Well, since that's the case, Mao Lijun, I'll leave everything to you. After saying this, Ashikaga Yoshimasa bowed solemnly to Maori regularization. Maori regularization hurriedly dodged, then said with a touched face, "General, with your words, even if I lose my life to Fukada Tani, so what?" Just like this, Maori regularization appeared in Fukada Tani's tent. Along the way, he had brought enough money. After a while of bribing, he finally appeared in front of Fukada Tani without attracting anyone's attention. Fukada Tani was very surprised by Maori regularization's sudden appearance. But after all, he was someone who had made a name for himself before. He quickly suppressed this shock in his heart. First, he looked outside the tent and found that everything was normal. When he saw that his personal guards were patrolling not too far away, he felt more confident. He said to Mao Lijun, "Mao Lijun, I have to say that your courage is not small. You actually dared to appear here alone. Don't you know that as long as I shout, someone will quickly rush in and take your life? At that time, if I hand you over to the 5-star army, it will definitely be a great achievement." Facing Fukada Tani's threat, Maori regularization first smiled, then lifted his robe and looked at Fukada Tani, who was a little nervous because of his actions, and said, "Kun Fukada, as you can see, I didn't bring any weapons, so I can't pose any threat to you. So I still have a few words to say to you. If you still want to take me down after hearing them, then I have nothing to say. No threat at all." Fukada Tani let out a long sigh of relief, and his expression returned to normal. "Hee, Mao Lijun, you're quite brave. Good. With your boldness, this general will listen to what you have to say." Chapter 1128. At this moment, Fukada Tani was a little relaxed, and even a little happy. Especially when he saw Maori regularization, who used to order him around, lower his head, his mood was very good. Because he was happy, a smile unconsciously appeared on his face, and all of this fell into Maori regularization's eyes, which made him unable to help but have a trace of hatred in his heart. He was not a person who would not lower his head, just like when he faced General Ashikaga Yoshimasa, he often lowered his head. But to a villain like Fukada Tani, he was too unwilling. If it were not for the sake of this big plan, he would not have done this. And even if he did this, he secretly swore in his heart that once the plan succeeded, it would be the time for him to take Fukada Tani's life. Maori regularization thought with hatred in his heart, but on the surface, he lowered his head and said, "Kun Fukada, this time I came here under the orders of the general. Please, for the sake of national justice, help the Japanese Empire fight back against the 5-star army. No matter what, the Japanese Empire should be our Japanese Empire, and we should not let outsiders touch it. Otherwise, our future generations will curse us for the rest of their lives." Maori regularization still wanted to talk, but Fukada Tani said impatiently, "Japanese Empire is your Japanese Empire, not ours, right? What kind of person was Ashikaga Yoshimasa, and how much he thirsted for power, as a former subordinate, Fukada Tani knew very well, so there was naturally no problem with this question. "Fukada-kun, please wait for a moment. Let me finish my words." No one would be happy to have their words interrupted. If it were not for the situation, Maori regularization would have reprimanded him. "Humph!" Fukada Tani snorted and turned his head to the side to express his dissatisfaction, but he didn't say anything else. Then, he continued to listen to Maori regularization. "Kun Fukada, you asked a good question just now. I will answer this question now. In the future, the Japanese Empire will be our Japanese Empire. Regarding this matter, the Supreme General has already made a decision. Once he becomes the Emperor in the future, he will make you the Supreme General. You will be in charge of the military affairs of the entire Japanese Empire. Oh, that's right, here's a letter written by the general himself. You can take a look. As he spoke, Mao Lijeng handed over a prepared letter. In order to show his respect, he even extended both of his hands to pass it over. Initially, Xianxia had a nonchalant and joking expression on his face. However, when he heard that he would be appointed as the great general, his expression suddenly froze. Then, he sat up straighter. This. Did the great general really say that? Of course. How could it be fake when it's written? If the Supreme General can't do it, Kun Fukada can take out this letter and announce it to the world. The Maori regularization's tone was extremely firm. With the letter in hand, Fukada Tani opened it and read it carefully. When he found that what was written was exactly the same as what the Maori regularization said, his expression became more excited. All of this fell into the eyes of the Maori regularization. After he sneered in his heart, he continued to add, "That's right, in order to express his sincerity and thank Kun Fukada for being so righteous, the Supreme General specially asked me to bring 500,000 taels of silver for you." Then, a 500,000 taels of silver was sent to Fukada Tani. With power and money, no one would be able to resist such benefits. In addition, the Maori regularization continued to say, "Kun Fukada, if this matter is successful, you will be the savior of the Japanese Empire. People will remember you for generations to come. This is an incomparably glorious matter." Yes, yes. Fukada Tani's face changed from a joking expression to one of surprise. He was smiling from ear to ear. At this moment, he really wanted to laugh 3 times to express his current feelings. But when he saw the Maori regularization standing in front of him very carefully, he suddenly came to a realization. His expression became very serious, and he said very seriously, "I have seen the Supreme General's sincerity. He is right. The matters of the Japanese Empire should be solved within the Japanese Empire. How can we let outsiders benefit? Since that is the case, I am willing to raise my troops to help the Supreme General." His words were dignified and even had a sense of justice. But both of them knew that this was just an excuse. Sure enough, money can solve everything. Seeing Fukada Tani's current performance, the Maori regularization laughed. Then, Fukada Tani's laughter also sounded. 8 hours later, when the sky was completely dark, the Maori regularization left. He brought Fukada Tani's promise and the plan that the two of them had discussed together. This was a good counterattack that Ashikaga Yoshimasa and the Maori regularization had thought of. They wanted to instigate Fukada Tani to rebel, and then make the center blossom. When the time came, they could suddenly send troops when the 5-star army was in chaos. This way, they would be able to win this war with the momentum of the autumn wind sweeping away the fallen leaves. It had to be said that this idea was somewhat risky, but fortunately, they succeeded. Ashikaga Yoshimasa saw the Maori regularization again. After listening to his report, he couldn't help but slap his thigh in joy and say the word "good" 3 times. "Good, good, that's great. Mao Lijun, did you discuss to launch a counterattack in 2 days?" "Yes, everything has been discussed. When the time comes, Fukada Tani will naturally make a move on Sensei Naganobu. Then, he will burn the provisions of the 5-star army. We will take advantage of this and attack." The Maori regularization said excitedly. Very good. When the time comes, the position of Supreme General will naturally belong to Mao Lijun. As for that Fukada Tani, you should know what to do." Ashikaga Yoshimasa looked at the Maori regularization with satisfaction and said. A murderous look flashed in the eyes of the Maori regularization, and he immediately replied, "Please rest assured, Supreme General, your subordinate naturally knows what to do. First, take the letter, then kill. It will be very clean." That's great. Ashikaga Yoshimasa's laughter once again resounded in the tent. Because the 5-star army's 3 strong armies had suddenly retreated from the battlefield, Ashikaga Yoshimasa, who was originally prepared to withdraw from the Japanese Empire, made a new decision. He wanted to shed blood, he wanted to win back everything that he had lost. Regarding this, the 5-star army on the other side didn't know about this. They still continued to do as they pleased, slowly pushing forward the battle line, slowly moving towards Musashi Prefecture. In the next 2 days, under the careful supervision of the 2 commanders, Tense and Kushueda, they took down another outlying county of Musashi Prefecture. They were one step closer to success. After a day of hurrying, the soldiers were a little tired. In the evening, they started to cook early. Other than the necessary sentries, the rest of the main forces went to sleep. They needed to accumulate enough strength for the next day. Compared to the silence of the 5-star army's camp, 10 li in front of them, 100,000 Japanese army was slowly approaching. The one leading the Japanese Empire's Supreme General, Ashikaga Yoshimasa, and his deputy, Maori Regularization. This time, all of the 100,000 soldiers were brought out. Clearly, they were prepared to go all out. This might be their last chance. If they won, they would rise again. If they lost, they would retreat. The 2 of them walked in the middle of the group. Their expressions were incomparably solemn. Before they saw the final result, their hearts were hanging high. The agreed time was getting closer and closer. The 2 of them were like defendants waiting to be judged by the judge. Their breathing became a lot heavier. Time passed by minute. Finally, the time that was supposed to come came. When it was midnight, the sound of battle cries could be heard from the distance. Then, flames soared into the sky, illuminating the horizon and turning it red. They finally made their move. Pass down my order, all troops attack. Supreme General, Ashikaga Yoshimasa, looked at the scene in front of him. Naturally, he was very excited. After a loud shout, the 100,000 Japanese Empire in front and behind him increased their speed and rushed straight ahead. At this time, the 5-star army's camp was in a mess. Corpses covered the ground. The smell of blood rushed to the nose and throat. There were military tents that were still burning. Fukada Tani, who was in full armor, was riding majestically on a tall horse and commanding the army. This time, he suddenly launched a night attack and caught Sensei Naganobu off guard. He killed thousands of people and captured countless people. He perfectly completed the mission given to him by the Supreme General. If there was a flaw, it would be that Sensei Naganobu used the chaos and the night to escape. But it didn't matter. He was just a stray dog. Fukada Tani didn't care about him at all. At this moment, he seemed to see the position of Supreme General getting closer and closer. It was almost within his reach. When Ashikaga Yoshimasa arrived with the army, he saw this scene. Seeing that the Supreme General had arrived, Xianxia put away the smile on his face and stepped forward to report the results of the battle excitedly. His saliva was really scattered all over the sky. At this moment, even if Ashikaga Yoshimasa didn't like Fukada Tani, he had to admit that the other party still had some charm and ability. At least, he completed the mission very well. So after listening to everything, he patted Fukada Tani's shoulder and said, "Very good, the next Supreme General is you. Now, we have to follow up the victory and completely defeat the 5-star army. We have to take back everything that originally belonged to us. Yes. I am willing to be the vanguard and contribute to the new Japanese Empire." As if he was infected, Fukada Tani once again took the initiative to ask for the order. "Good, then I will have to trouble Kun Fukada." Ashikaga Yoshimasa nodded with satisfaction. Someone was willing to take the initiative to be the vanguard. That was really something to be happy about. Fukada Valley left, and he personally led his army of 50,000 to pursue the enemy. Behind him was Mori Masanori, who was also leading an army of 50,000. At the very back was Supreme General Ashikaga Yoshimasa, who was leading an army of 50,000. Chapter 1129. A total of 150,000 soldiers charged forward like a long dragon, chasing after the 5-star army. It could be said that they were invincible. They did not even need Maori regularization to do anything as they continued to advance. Along the way, they could see the corpses of the 5-star army soldiers lying on the ground. Unfortunately, most of them were from the Japanese Empire. Although Maori regularization could not bear to see them die, he knew that these people had betrayed them and deserved to die. After thinking about killing all of the Sensei Naganabu's men, it should be the Han people next. He could not help but become excited. The night passed by as they chased each other. By the time the next day dawned, they had already traveled 30 to 40 kilometers. When the sun rose and shone on their bodies, they felt a warm feeling. Fatigue also surged through their bodies. Reporting to General, the scouts at the front have sent news that General Fukada Tani's army has disappeared. Just as Maoli was lazily stretching his back on his horse, a personal guard walked over and said something that made him turn pale with fright. Disappeared? Could it be that they ran too fast and lost track of them? Maori regularization felt that something was wrong, but he did not think of the worst possibility. We didn't lose them, but they deliberately hid. General, we are surrounded by tall mountains. If someone wants to hide, it won't be easy to find them. The bodyguard didn't dare to speak nonsense without evidence, but he still had the ability to remind the general. They deliberately hid? How is that possible? Mao Lijeng still had a look of disbelief on his face, but soon his eyes widened. Clearly, he had thought of a possibility. He suddenly shouted, "Pass down the order, pass down the order, stop advancing and retreat immediately." If Fukada Tani deliberately disappeared, then there was a big problem. The worst and most likely result was that he did not intend to help the general at all. On the contrary, he did all this to lure them into a trap. Maori regularization came to a realization, but it was too late. Because just as he ordered the army to stop, and before the order had even reached the ears of the 50,000 soldiers, deafening battle cries suddenly came from the surrounding mountains. Then, countless bright-colored 5-star army soldiers covered the sky and covered the earth. It was as if a large blanket was about to wrap them up completely. When the battle cries sounded, Maori regularization's expression became very bad. He did not think that the worst result would happen. Speaking of his previous impression of Fukada Tani, whether it was Maori regularization or Supreme General Ashikaga Yoshimasa, they did not completely trust him. According to the previous plan, they would only attack when the 5-star army was defeated. But the strange thing was that the beginning of the battle was too smooth. Fukada Tani actually burned down the granary, and there were so many Japanese army corpses on the ground. Maori regularization also carefully looked at the corpses and found that the people on the ground had indeed died not long ago. It was all of this that dispelled all of Maori regularization's worries. Now that he thought about it, he was still too anxious. Even if Fukada Tani really fought with them against the 5-star army, with his strength, how could he do all of this so easily? It was completely because he was forced too hard. Now that he finally saw the light of hope, he threw himself into it without caring about anything else. There's no need to retreat. Tell everyone to shrink the formation and resist as much as possible. As long as we can hold on for a while, the Supreme General will definitely send troops to save us. Maori regularization was worthy of being a commander for many years. When he saw the qualitative change in the situation, he immediately changed the battlefield strategy. However, facing the 5-star army that had been prepared for a long time, even if Maori regularization's orders were accurate, once they reached here, everything would be over. 5 foreign divisions, plus more than 100,000 Japanese army led by Fukada Tani and Sensei Naganabu, a total of more than 200,000 people. And this was after they were prepared to deal with only 50,000 Maori regularization. There was no suspense at all about the result. The fierce battle began. Countless soldiers of the 5-star army rushed towards the Japanese army that was surrounded. The sound of swords clashing could be heard endlessly. Under the great momentum, after resisting for less than an hour, the Japanese army's defensive formation began to show various loopholes. Gradually, the Japanese army began to surrender and kneel on the ground. The outcome of the battle was about to be decided. Not far from the center of the battlefield, Sensei Naganabu looked at Fukada Tani, who was also riding a tall horse, with a trace of envy and said, "Kun Fukada, this time you have made a great contribution. Bugnam of Gojoseon will definitely record it down." "Ha ha ha, Meiji-kun, I'll take your blessings. In fact, Bugnam of Gojoseon has already promised me the benefits I need. I'm very satisfied." When Fukada Tani said this, there was an unconcealable excitement on his face. Yes, the reason why the Maori regularization was surrounded was all because of Fukada Tani's betrayal. Ever since the Maori regularization appeared in front of him and spoke sincerely, Fukada Tani was not moved at all. However, he still pretended to accept everything in order to make a great contribution. Just like when the Maori regularization left, Fukada Tani went to find the 7th Army's commander, Tian Su, and the 1st Reserve Division's commander, Su Kuda, and told them everything that had just happened. Fukada Tani's IQ was not low at all. He was chosen by Ashikaga Yoshimasa to stay in Ping and Beijing. He clearly understood the situation. The so-called Supreme General of the Japanese Empire was nothing more than a grasshopper after autumn. He would not be able to jump around for more than a few days. Not to mention, with what he had done, it would be strange if Ashikaga Yoshimasa would forgive him. The position of Supreme General? Only a fool would believe it so easily. Cooperating with such a person was simply courting death. Take advantage of your weakness to take your life. At this juncture, the most important thing was to find a way to step on him and maximize the benefits. In order to ensure that his rights and interests were not lost, Fukada Tani took the initiative to find Tian Su and Su Kuda to report his work. From this point alone, it could be seen that he was very cautious. It was as if he was afraid that if he only went to find one of the commanders, the matter would be leaked and he would lose the credit. Fukada Tani underestimated Tian Su and Su Kuda. The former was the commander of Lengfeng Lu and had a limitless future. The latter was the commander of the 1st Reserve Division and was in charge of 30,000 veterans. His future was also unpredictable. How could these two people steal Fukada Tani's credit? Therefore, this news was quickly sent to Yang Chendong in Ping and Beijing in the form of a telegram. Not long after, a telegram came back. First, he praised Fukada Tani's loyalty. Then, he stated that the 500,000 taels of benefits given by Ashikaga Yoshimasa were all for Fukada Tani's personal use. Not only that, once the Japanese Empire became a province of Yangxia, if he wanted, he could stay in the Japanese Empire and become a true Supreme General. This was Yang Chendong's breadth of mind. His vision had never been limited to a city or a place. His goal was the entire world. A small Japanese empire was nothing to him. Not to mention, when the Japanese Empire became a province in the future, it was necessary to have a local Supreme General. Only then could they avoid more internal friction. Fukada Tani's ability to lead troops into battle was average, but he was smart enough to see the situation clearly. Yang Chendong was very relieved to have someone like him manage the military of the Japanese Empire in the future. After Tian Su and Su Kuda read the telegram, it was sent to Fukada Tani. He was extremely excited and repeatedly said that he would fully cooperate with the 5-star Army's military operation and fight a beautiful battle for the world to see. Tian Su and Su Kuda, who originally wanted to show off and prove themselves, would not let go of such an opportunity. After the three of them discussed, they came up with a military plan to lure the enemy in and surround them to destroy them. Everything was going smoothly. The Maori regularization was surrounded by more than 4 times the number of soldiers, completely cutting off any thoughts of escape. At this moment, Fukada Tani's face was full of smiles and joy. The surrounded Maori regularization was still struggling to lead his troops. From time to time, he would anxiously look behind him. He was waiting for the arrival of the Supreme General. With 50,000 reinforcements arriving, the gap in strength would be reduced. They would still have the strength to fight. At the very least, their chances of breaking out of the encirclement would be much higher. Unfortunately, the Maori regularization was destined not to be able to wait for reinforcements. At this moment, Ashikaga Yoshimasa was not feeling good either. He, who was following behind, had also fallen into the trap of the 5-star army. At this moment, he was surrounded by 30,000 veterans of the 1st Reserve Division and the 7th Army, who were all armed with firearms. At daybreak, such a scene appeared in front of him. While Ashikaga Yoshimasa was shocked, he also felt a sense of powerlessness. He did not expect the situation in front of him to be like this. There were still too many questions that he did not understand. Taking advantage of the fact that the two sides were only surrounding each other and had not yet engaged in battle, Ashikaga Yoshimasa took the initiative to ride to the front of the army. He asked the two division commanders, Tian Su and Su Kuda, who were opposite him, "The two of you, I admit defeat this time. Before I fight to the death, there is one thing that I would like to clarify. Seeing that I may die, please tell me the answer. Don't let me be a confused ghost, okay?" Ashikaga Yoshimasa lowered his noble head just to ask a question. As the soon-to-be victors, Tian Su and Su Kuda, of course, would fulfill his request. Tian Su took the initiative to say, "Okay, as long as your question does not involve any military secrets, we can consider telling you the answer." "Thank you." Imitating the Han people, Ashikaga Yoshimasa clasped his fist and bowed again. Then, he raised his head and asked, "Last night, your camp was ablaze. That should be the rations being burned, right? Also, there were so many corpses on the ground. I saw that they were indeed people who died not long ago. I want to ask, what is going on?" Chapter 1130. If it weren't for the existence of these two facts, with Ashikaga Yoshimasa's suspicious personality, why would he take the initiative to chase after them? If that was the case, they wouldn't be trapped now. These two questions were really puzzling, but they didn't involve any military secrets. After Tian Su and Su Ku exchanged glances, Tian Su laughed and said, "Okay, then we'll fulfill your wish and let you be a ghost who understands everything. To tell you the truth, the provisions were indeed burned, but it's just moldy food. It can only emit the smell, but it can't be eaten. As for the corpses of the dead Japanese army soldiers, it's even easier to explain. During this period of time, there were many people in your country who opposed our 5-star army. They took the opportunity to burn, kill, and loot, and did all kinds of evil. Because of this, many of them were captured. I just didn't expect them to play such a role before they died, but thinking about it, it's worth it." As soon as Tian Su's voice fell, Ashikaga Yoshimasa's face became very ugly. He didn't expect that those who died were actually his own people who opposed the 5-star army. Those who were supposed to support him were now mercilessly killed on the battlefield, and became bait for his own destruction. This scene was really unacceptable. Ashikaga Yoshimasa sat on the horse as if he was scared silly. Using this opportunity, the 5-star army launched a general attack. Ashikaga Yoshimasa, whose will was affected, no longer had the energy to command the army. Coupled with the all-out assault of the 7th Army, the battle became one-sided from the beginning. Just before the sky turned dark, the main force of the Japanese army who lost the will to resist was destroyed, and most of them were captured. Among them, Ashikaga Yoshimasa and Maori regularization died in the battle. Even before they died, their final plan to escape from the Japanese Empire was not realized. The news of General Ashikaga Yoshimasa's death on the battlefield was spread by some deserters. The Japanese Naval Division General Kuroda Naganori, who was preparing to meet him in Jianghu Prefecture, quickly left on a ship, taking 100,000 Japanese Army Navy Division and disappeared into the vast sea. Even if the 5-star Army Navy Division and Navy Division went all out to chase after him, they still couldn't find him. When the news was passed back to Yang Chendong, although there was a trace of regret, he still gave the order to stop the chase. For the sake of a stray dog who escaped, sending 2 elite Navy divisions to chase after him was meaningless. With the escape of Kuroda, the general situation of the Japanese Empire was already set. The next step was to encircle and annihilate some of the opposition forces in the remote areas and re-establish the political system. It was not the first time that Yang Shi had occupied other forces, so he was already familiar with the way. In less than 5 days, Du Jin, who had come from Korea, arrived here. He was the governor of a province appointed by Yang Chendong. Judging from the time, he should have received the news a long time ago. At this point, the War of the Japanese Empire lasted 14 months from January 1458 to February 1459. The Japanese Empire became a part of Yang Xi's territory and changed its name to Japan Province. The governor was Du Jin, and the general was Fukada Tani. In order to maintain the stability and prosperity of Japan Province, not only did Yang Xia open a lot of businesses here, but Yang Chendong also allowed 100,000 soldiers and 100,000 navy divisions to stay here. At the same time that Shaowei Province was established, many mines were being developed at the same time. According to Yang Chendong's memories from his previous life, many mines that would take many years to be discovered were being developed one by one, especially silver mines. It could be imagined that with so many silver mines being developed, it would be a great financial support for Yang Xi's forces. Of course, these things were handed over to the new governor, Du Jin, to deal with. As Japan Province was established and gradually stabilized, Yang Chendong's eyes began to move to the west, which was Baiming and the grasslands. Before this, a piece of news first appeared in front of Yang Chendong. According to Su Yozhen, 50,000 Baiming Navy divisions had arrived at Japan Province's South Sea Road. Because communication was blocked, these people didn't know that the Japanese Empire had been replaced by Yang Xi's Japan Province. They're here to give you a gift. Alright, accept it. After receiving the news, Yang Chendong laughed and gave the order. In reality, this wasn't a coincidence. It was something that Yang Chendong had planned for a long time. Even the 4th Army Division, the 1st Cavalry Division, and the new army had been mobilized from the battlefield to welcome these 50,000 Baiming Navy divisions. 50,000 Baiming Navy divisions weren't much, not to mention that they had just been established, so their fighting strength was mediocre. The reason why Yang Chendong attached so much importance to them was to attack Baiming Navy divisions and use this name to make a move against Baiming. Yes, Yang Chendong had already decided to go to war with Baiming. Since the other party wanted to attack the new Second Army, it would be impolite not to reciprocate. Of course, he had to return the favor. As for whether this battle would be a partial one or a full-scale one, it would depend on the development of the situation. Baiming Navy divisions naturally knew Yang Chendong's intentions. Especially the Navy Division General Song Yong. At this moment, he was standing on a ship in high spirits, looking at the Japanese army soldiers and civilians who were lining the streets to welcome him. South Sea Road, Tosa Prefecture. This place was close to the coastline and was also the only way for various forces to enter this place. Now, in front of the largest dock here, there were tens of thousands of soldiers and civilians of the Japanese Empire. They were shouting the slogan of the Celestial Empire to welcome the guests from afar. Song Yong, who was leading a group of Baiming Navy divisions, had a full smile on his face. He was very happy in his heart. Everything in front of him made him very excited. After all, it would be strange if he wasn't in a good mood after receiving such a welcome. What made him the happiest was that on the way here, they had encountered the 5-star Army at sea. At that time, he was very nervous. Everyone knew that the 5-star Army's Navy divisions were very powerful. Just when Song Yong was sweating cold sweat and was thinking about whether to return the fleet or not, the 5-star Army's Navy divisions suddenly retreated. It was as if they were afraid of them. The difference between heaven and earth made Song Yong a little confused, but he quickly remembered that he was representing Baiming. Even if the great Ming dynasty was divided into two, a starving camel was still bigger than a horse. It was still not something that anyone could spy on. It was precisely because of this experience that Song Yong was full of confidence in this operation. Even the powerful 5-star Army's Navy divisions didn't dare to be enemies with him. What else was there to be afraid of? As a result, his task this time should be very simple. Along the way, his mood became very happy. When he arrived at the island of the Japanese Empire, he saw the huge crowd here to welcome him. The trace of worry he had disappeared. Song Yong's mood was very good. With his hands behind his back, he walked forward steadily with a confident smile on his face. It gave people the feeling that as soon as they appeared here, they would be able to quickly solve the crisis here. After Song Yong got off the ship and received a warm welcome, more and more Baiming soldiers also got off the ship one after another. After drifting on the sea for so many days, anyone would feel a little uncomfortable. Now that they could walk on land, and they were so welcomed, it was a very wonderful thing. The person in charge of welcoming Song Yong was a Japanese army general called Okabe Uchiyama. It was said that he was a very important general under Ashikaga Yoshimasa. He was responsible for receiving Song Yong and his party. This Okabe Uchiyama, who was not very tall and even looked a little wretched, seemed to be very good at grasping people's hearts. He had a smile on his face that made people feel like they were bathing in spring. He accompanied Song Yong all the way to a small town not far from the dock. "General Song, we thank the great Ming Empire for sending troops to support us. In order to express our gratitude, the great Ming Empire has prepared food and wine, as well as beautiful women. We will certainly not let General Song down." At the same time, Okabe Uchiyama took out 2 banknotes worth 100,000 silver from his arms like a magic trick and put them in Song Yong's hand when no one was looking. Song Yong's eyes only glanced at the banknotes. After seeing the amount on it, the originally very happy Song Yong's face became even redder. He didn't expect to have such a harvest. It was said that the Japanese Empire was a small country, poor and pitiful. He thought that coming here would be difficult, but now it seems that this was not the case. It has to be said that the great Ming Empire's people were prejudiced. Under the Confucian education, they seemed to be the only orthodox people in the world, and they were the most powerful. Because of this, they had a sense of superiority, but if they underestimated the great Ming Empire, it was only a matter of time before they suffered a big loss. Back to the topic, Song Yong held the banknotes in his arms and patted his chest in joy as he said to Okabe Uchiyama, "General Okabe, you can rest assured. With our Baiming Navy here, the 5-star Army will not dare to act rashly. They are only the subjects of Bugnam of Gojoseon. How could they dare to become enemies with the Emperor of Baiming?" "Good, with General Song's words, that's great. How about this, let's drink and eat first. In the words of the Han people, it's a welcoming dinner for everyone. After that, we'll go and rest. I've arranged a surprise for General Song in the room. As for the 5-star Army, we'll talk about it tomorrow." Okabe Uchiyama's eyes were squinted, and he was smiling so much that his eyes almost disappeared. He was expressing his joy. Of course, Song Yong knew what an unexpected surprise was. He had just seen a lot of girls from the Japanese Empire in the crowd. They were all dressed up beautifully, and their eyes were like silk. Their faces were so soft that it seemed like water could be squeezed out of them. There were a lot of girls, and they had already attracted the attention of the Baiming Navy soldiers. Okabe Uchiyama had also intentionally mentioned the word beautiful, so how could he not know what it meant? Good, then I will have to trouble General Okabe. General Song is too polite. This is what we should do. You are here to help us. Okabe Uchiyama continued to laugh. Those girls were indeed from the Japanese Empire, but they were different from normal girls from the Japanese Empire. They were the family members of the great generals and the soldiers. Now that the great general was dead, as the family members and relatives, they naturally needed an explanation. In the end, after some consideration, Okabe Uchiyama gathered them together and started a sex business. Chapter 1131. Unlike the women in the brothel, they were only responsible for solving the personal problems of the soldiers. When the matter was reported to Yang Chendong, he hesitated for a while, but in the end, he did not refuse. On the contrary, he gave a name to these women, calling them comfort women. Speaking of which, this was naturally not tolerated by the great Ming Dynasty and even the thousands of years of Huaxia's Confucianism. However, when he thought of what happened in Nanjing in his previous life, and how many women in Huaxia were harmed by the Japanese Empire, he could not bear to do it. He took it as an interest. What Yang Chendong did not expect was that when the children of the sinners found out that they did not need to die, and only needed to serve the men, and if they performed well, they could even get money to help the sinners get out of trouble. Most of them did not object, and instead, they were excited that they could do something for their families. This was the nature of servility and lowliness. After hearing about this, Yang Chendong finally did not say anything. Even when the 8th madam found out about this, she did not say anything. First of all, these were the children of the sinners, and it would be unreasonable if they were not punished. Second of all, in the Japanese Empire, men were superior to women. Now that they had a chance to wash away all the shame, this kind of opportunity was hard to come by. Of course, Junko also asked Yang Chendong about this matter. She meant that the daughters of the sinners could do this, but the ordinary people did not need to do this. Otherwise, what would the men of the Japanese Empire do? Yang Chendong, who did not agree to this, quickly satisfied Junko's request. He stipulated that only the daughters of the sinners could enter the comfort women. If there was any coercion, no matter who was involved, no matter what level of authority was involved, they would all be severely punished. In this way, an independent group of women appeared, and the first task they received was to entertain the 50,000 Baiming soldiers who came from afar. They wanted to make them happy and satisfied, so that they would put down all their vigilance, and work hard for the next plan. Under special arrangements, more and more women from the Japanese Empire were brought to the temporary barracks of the Baiming Navy outside the town. Because there were too many wolves and too little meat, it was said that there were some disputes when it was almost night time. Some soldiers even had internal strife and fights because of the lack of women. Of course, this was only a small matter, because in the middle of the night, something even bigger happened. Countless soldiers of the 5-star army suddenly appeared like divine soldiers descending from the heavens. With lightning speed, they took control of the 50,000 Baiming Navy soldiers. Many soldiers could not understand this sudden scene. Some of them put on their clothes and picked up their weapons to resist, but they were quickly suppressed. In the face of the 5-star army, who was many times stronger than them in terms of both numbers and combat power, and they were completely unprepared, they couldn't even withstand a single blow. The 50,000 Baiming Navy soldiers were all captured, and even the soldiers who stayed on the ships did not have the chance to escape. They were all wiped out by the 5-star army. The last one was Song Yong, who was enjoying the pleasure of a man in the town. When he was sleeping soundly with a woman from the Japanese Empire in each of his arms, the 5-star army suddenly rushed into his room and made him fall from heaven to hell. The naked Song Yong was pulled out of his bed with his butt naked. Song Yong didn't wake up until his body touched the ground and he felt the coldness of the neon soil in February. Then, he shouted, "What are you doing? I am the general of the Baiming Navy, and I am here to help you. Are you trying to rebel?" Song Yong's shout was not soft, but no one cared. When he was dragged all the way to the main hall of the room, under the bright lights, he saw Yang Chendong sitting on the main seat. He was wearing a green robe, and his entire body was emitting an oppressive aura. Yang Chendong was not just a name, but a famous person. Although there was no photography at that time, there were many excellent artists. Yang Chendong's appearance had long been spread among the people. Song Yong was a general who commanded 50,000 soldiers, and this time, he was going to make things difficult for the 5-star army. How could he not recognize him? So when he saw Yang Chendong sitting on the main seat, his brain instantly short-circuited. He did not expect Yang Chendong to appear here. For a moment, he reflexively said, "Bugnam of Gojoseon, why are you here? Should be facing the siege of the Japanese army in Ping and Beijing." "Humph, ignorant guy. Let me tell you, the Japanese Empire is gone. Before you could even set foot on this land, it had already been conquered by this king." Yang Chendong's voice carried a trace of ridicule. The dignified Baiming actually sent such a good-for-nothing general to deal with him. He did not know if he should say that the other party was ignorant or arrogant. Like a bolt from the blue, when these words entered Song Yong's ears, he was so shocked that he could not speak. The powerful Japanese Empire was actually defeated and conquered by the 5-star army. He wanted to say that this was impossible, but when he thought of Yang Chendong's previous actions, it seemed that it was not impossible. Especially now that he was surrounded by the 5-star army's generals and soldiers, and there was no Japanese army around. There were also no sounds of killing. This was enough to prove everything. Song Yong was not a general with a backbone. The only reason he was able to be in his current position was because he was smooth and slick. Now that he knew that the situation was not good for him, the only thing he could think of was to save himself. In front of so many 5-star army's generals, Song Yong knelt on the ground and crawled at Yang Chendong's feet. Under the light, his white but was very dazzling. "Bugnam of Gojoseon, this general was wrong. I should not have come to be your enemy. But all of this was the Emperor's will. This general did not dare to disobey. Don't worry, as long as you let me go back, I will definitely not be an enemy of the 5-star army. I am willing to swear." With snot and tears, Song Yong did not have the demeanor of a general at all. But right now, not only did his appearance not make people feel any pity or sympathy, it only made him receive countless disdain. In front of so many generals, if he had some backbone, even if he died, he would still receive everyone's respect. But kneeling and begging for mercy was the most cowardly display. Soldiers were cowardly, while generals were cowardly. It could be imagined that even the general leading the army was like this. It would be strange if they could train qualified and outstanding soldiers. Yang Chendong was also speechless at Song Yong's current appearance. He originally thought that the other party would appear and reprimand him. After all, from a righteous point of view, the other party had received the order of the Emperor of Baiming, while he was just a king. He had even planned to talk back to him, but he never thought that the other party would kneel on the ground and beg for mercy. This made him unable to say a lot of the words he had prepared. Of course, Song Yong's fear of death made it much easier for Yang Chendong to carry out the next military plan. First, he rolled his eyes at Song Yong, who was kneeling on the ground. Then, he turned his gaze to Yang Er, who was standing next to him. He then covered Song Yong with a sheet. Although the thin sheet couldn't play an absolute role in this cold weather, it could still cover his face. "I'll leave the rest to you." Yang Chendong suddenly lost interest. A person who was so afraid of death, as long as he didn't take his life, he would not refuse to do anything he wanted him to do. After saying this to Beta Persei, Yang Chendong said to the commander of the 4th Army Division, Ling Duqiang, the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division, Tian Hu, and the commander of the new army, Su He, who were waiting at the side. "The 3 of you, go back and prepare. The army will set off tomorrow morning." "Yes." The 3 generals who had always been arrogant, after hearing Yang Chendong's words, they all respectfully lowered their heads and answered. At the same time, the 3 of them were also very excited. After such a long time, could they finally compete with the Baiming army? After Yang Chendong left, Beta Persei did not leave with him. Instead, he appeared in front of Song Yong, who was kneeling on the ground, with a smile on his face. "General Song, it's time for us to have a good talk, but I don't know if you're willing to cooperate." "Don't worry, even if you don't cooperate, I won't kill you. Instead, I'll make you feel worse than death." Although Beta Persei had a smile on his face, Song Yong felt a chill and a sense of danger. He immediately said desperately, "General, please rest assured that I will cooperate. As long as you don't kill me, I'll do anything." A few hours later, when the sky had just brightened, tens of thousands of the 5-star army boarded Baiming's ships and disappeared. In just one day, the docks in Tosa Prefecture regained its tranquility. If it was someone who did not know, they would not be able to imagine that this place would be so lively yesterday. Shajing City. Tomorrow was the 20th day, which meant that he only had one night to delay. He had to make a decision whether to surrender or fight. Sitting in the study room, the candlelight reflected on his face. He had only been surrounded for a few months, but at this moment, he looked a lot paler than before. Mental exhaustion was the reason for all of this. Originally, he was just a Mongolian general, and he was even the kind of general who was not valued. In the past, even eating and dressing had been a problem. However, everything changed after meeting Yang Chendong. He was put in an important position and was treated better. Especially the trust he had in Yang Chendong made him feel like he was willing to die for his bosom friend. Especially after he became the commander of the new Second Army, he was ready to go all out. He wanted to let everyone know that the 6th young master did not misjudge him. He had such strength, and most importantly, he had such loyalty. Chapter 1132. Everything was destroyed as the two cities of Shajing and Jingzhou were besieged. At this moment, the fate of hundreds of thousands of people and tens of thousands of soldiers was in his own hands. Perhaps a wrong decision would cause everyone to lose their lives, or perhaps a wrong decision would allow everyone to continue living. The choice had made Shibi very anxious. He had sent telegrams to Yang Chendong more than once to express his worries. He had also asked him to lead the new Second Army to break out of the encirclement. In this way, the hundreds of thousands of people in the two cities might suffer. Under the heavy encirclement, he could not guarantee how many people in the new Second Army could escape. But at least he did not lower his head. He lived up to the trust Yang Chendong had in him. However, everything came to an abrupt end with a new telegram from Yang Chendong. It clearly said, "The changes in the situation often catch people off guard. But thinking back to the humiliation of Han Xian and the suffering of the King of Yu, it all proves that temporarily lowering your head and lying low is also a wise move. As for where to go, no matter what decision you make, I believe in you." It was a simple sentence. There was no deliberate guidance or command. It was a sentence that placed all the initiative in his hands. But the more it was like this, the more Shibi felt the weight of the responsibility. He could not make a decision for a long time. "Master," outside the door, Division Commander Kong Ji and Guard Captain Wu asked to see you. Just when Shibi was still struggling in his heart and could not make any decision, the voice of the butler sounded outside the door. Kong Ji, the division commander of the 1st Cavalry Division of the new Second Army, could be said to be second only to Shibi in the army. In other words, once something happened to Shibi, Kong Ji would be the temporary division commander of the new Second Army. This was also what Yang Chendong had said when he established the new Second Army. Wu Xiaoyi, Shibi's guard captain, was not only strong, but also loyal. It could be said that he was the last line of defense to ensure Shibi's safety. When something big happened, Shibi would discuss it with him. It could be seen that he was also a very important figure in the new Second Army. It was these two people who came together in the night. Even Shibi did not pay attention to them. "Please." Soon, the housekeeper brought the two of them into the study. Knowing that there was something important to discuss, the housekeeper took the initiative to leave and closed the door. When there were only 3 people left in the room, the atmosphere could not help but become a little tense. Perhaps everyone knew that time was limited, so after a few moments of silence, the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division took the initiative to ask, "Commander, tomorrow is the deadline given by Biming. What's your decision?" Shibi didn't answer immediately. Instead, she asked, "What do you two think?" At this moment, the atmosphere in the room became tense again. The 3 of them knew that every decision would affect the life and death of hundreds of thousands of people. But no matter how difficult it was, the decision still had to be made. After Division Commander Kong Ji and the guard captain Wu Xiaoyi looked at each other, the former said, "Commander, Shajing City is now surrounded by Biming's army. There is a shortage of food in the city. Even the soldiers have changed from 3 meals a day to 2 meals a day. Their combat strength is going to decline. Under such circumstances, we may have to surrender." As soon as Kong Ji finished speaking, the guard captain Wu Xiaoyi on the side agreed. "That's right. We are too weak. If we fight head-on, we won't have a good ending. So I agree to surrender to Biming." The 2 right-hand men spoke at the same time. After hearing this, Shibi's face became very ugly. She even trembled all over. Obviously, she was very angry. Under such circumstances, Kong Ji didn't seem to see it. He still asked, "Commander, what do you mean?" "What do I mean? Of course I don't agree. So what if we die? At most, we will be a hero again after 18 years. But if we really surrender to Biming, we will be cutting ourselves off from the 5th Star Army and the 6th Young Master. When that time comes, do you think you can live with your conscience? Even if we survive, we will be struggling at death's door. So, I will never surrender. At most, we will fight until both sides suffer. I believe that with a strong defense, even Biming's army won't be able to take advantage of us. Even if we lose in the end, we will take a bite out of them." Shibi said these words with a face full of anger. It was completely different from his usual calmness. He was really angry. He didn't expect that the 2 people he trusted the most would choose to surrender. This was what he couldn't stand. With this angry shout, Kong Ji and Wu Xiaoyi instantly became mute. Obviously, they didn't expect that the usually calm and resourceful commander would act so crazily. However, after a few moments, Kong Ji was the first to react. He also said in a very emotional tone, "Commander, are you really going to choose to fight head-on? Don't you know that if you really do this, it means that hundreds of thousands of people will die? How can you bear to do this?" "Of course I can't bear to do this, but compared to the 6th Young Master's importance, I am more unwilling to betray him even if it means death." Shibi's voice was resolute and decisive. At this moment, it seemed like Shibi had made the final decision. Shibi was the commander of an army. If he made this decision, then the matter was basically settled. Therefore, these words were the final decision. If nothing unexpected happened, Rongshao would come to the residence tomorrow and get this result. Kong Ji and Wu Xiaoyi should have been furious when they heard the result. After all, their lives had been lost as well. However, for some reason, not only were they not angry, they even chuckled. "Ha ha ha. Ha 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 ha ha." Xia Biao had been waiting for the 2 of them to interrogate him, and had even prepared himself for a big fight, when he suddenly heard endless laughter. At this moment, even he didn't know what was going on, so he looked at the 2 of them. Kong Ji and Wu Xiaoyi stood at attention almost at the same time, then solemnly saluted him. "Commander, we are sorry. Just now, we were just testing you. In fact, we have the same thoughts as you. We can't let down the 5-star army, and we can't let down Bugnam of Gojoseon." Shibi saw the 2's actions. At this moment, he finally understood what was going on. He couldn't help but shake his head with a bitter smile. To be honest, the two of you really made me angry just now. I thought there was something wrong with my eyes again. Hee, we can't learn from people like Su Yuan. I was personally chosen by the sixth young master. How could I do such a thing? That's right. First, he reprimanded Su Yuan verbally. Then, Kongji continued, Commander, your choice and loyalty are admirable and we should learn from you. However, the matter of Shajing City cannot be delayed. We must give you an explanation. What explanation do you need? Of course, we refuse to surrender and prepare to fight. This time, Shibi said without hesitation. No. Unexpectedly, Kongji, who just said that they couldn't let down the 5-star army and Bugnam of Gojoseon, changed his mind. Commander, we can't fight. If we fight, our new second army will definitely be defeated. Even the hundreds of thousands of civilians in the two cities won't be any better. We can't fight? Then we have to surrender. This time, Shibi was confused by Kongji's words. That's right, we can only surrender. Kongji's voice was firm as he spoke. As soon as he finished speaking, Wu Xiaoyi, who had been silent for a long time, said, We can only surrender. Commander, this is what we think. For the entire night, the candlelight in the study room never went out. As for what the three of them talked about, even the housekeeper who was in charge of guarding the door didn't know. The sky was finally bright, and those who were supposed to come would come. Just after breakfast, the merchant Rong Shao, accompanied by the infantry division commander Su Yuan, appeared at the headquarters of the new Second Army. Not only them, but there were also hundreds of infantry soldiers who came with them. They were all armed. The appearance of these people was a signal. If Shibi didn't agree to surrender, they would be responsible for protecting Su Yuan and Rong Shao until they safely left the headquarters of the new Second Army. They were even willing to fight among themselves. In the main hall of the headquarters of the new Second Army, Shibi sat there quietly. Although it was not late for the entire night, his eyes were still bright and full of spirit. At this moment, he was sitting there and watching everything that happened in the courtyard with an expressionless face. Especially when he saw Su Yuan appear with hundreds of soldiers, he couldn't help but snort coldly. Su Yuan, are you planning to rebel? Under Shibi's leadership for many years, Su Yuan was more or less a little afraid. However, when he saw Rong Shao beside him and the soldiers behind him, he couldn't help but feel a little more confident. Commander, you know that I won't be your enemy. I'm only doing this to protect myself. Humph, I knew you wouldn't have the guts to do so. Seeing Su Yuan take the initiative to show weakness, Shibi snorted coldly. Then, he looked at Rong Shao and said, You're here for an answer, right? General, she is wise. You said 20 days will pass, but I wonder what you'll choose? Rong Shao chuckled and spoke with the attitude of a victor. Sigh. After letting out a long sigh, Shibi did not immediately answer. Instead, he first raised his head to look at the sky before standing up with a sad expression. He walked into his courtyard and knelt on the ground under everyone's gazes. He was kneeling in the direction of the beginning city. Sixth young master, I've let you down. If you want to be angry, you can just kill or torture me. I'm doing this for the sake of the hundreds of thousands of soldiers and citizens. Chapter 1133. Rong Shao, who was watching from the side, couldn't help showing a hint of fondness in his eyes. He seemed to have thought of the result that the other party was going to give. It seemed that Shibi had made the decision to surrender. If so, he could take down Sha Jing and Jingzhou without shedding any blood. As the executor, he would make a great contribution. At that time, his future would be limitless. As Rong Shao expected, after a while, Shibi stood up and made the decision to surrender to Baiming, but he still put forward two conditions. First, everything he had now was given by Bugnam of Gojosian, so he would never be his enemy. He could help Baiming deal with other enemies, except for Xianxia and the 5-star army. Second, no one could hurt the 100,000 people in Shaojing and Jingzhou. Even if they did something extreme, as long as they didn't rebel against Baiming, no one could be caught, let alone killed. If Baiming could agree to the two conditions, as the commander of the new Second Army, Shibi could draft a letter of surrender to Baiming and announce it to the world. Shibi finally made a decision, and it was a decision that satisfied him. Rong Shao was already very happy, so he nodded and agreed. General Shibi's two conditions, I agree on behalf of Baiming. Please write the letter to the world now. There's no hurry. Let's talk about it after you write down the two conditions. To be honest, I don't trust you. She looked at Rong Shao with some disdain. Her eyes were extremely cold. Well said, well said. But before that, shouldn't General Shibi express something first? After all, I can't completely trust you. Rong Shao rolled his eyes, suppressing the anger in his heart from being looked down upon, and said thoughtfully. Yes, but how should I express it? Shibi asked back. This. Rong Shao first glanced at Su Yuan beside him, then said thoughtfully, why don't you give the order to completely hand over the safety of Shaojing City to General Su? This way, you can show your sincerity. Although Su Yuan was still the commander of the new Second Army's infantry division, it seemed that he had already surrendered to Baiming. With him in charge of the city's safety, Rong Shao and Baiming would be relieved. Shibi naturally knew this, so after pondering for a moment, he nodded and agreed, okay, I agree. Ha ha ha, good. Rong Shao couldn't help but laugh when he heard this. Once Su Yuan was in charge of the city's defense, it would be difficult for Shibi to go back on his word. At the very least, if they really fought, Su Yuan would only need to open the city gates and Baiming's army would be able to rush in. At that time, with the advantage of more than 10 times their military strength, victory would definitely belong to them. Forced, Shibi finally made the decision to surrender. Although this was betraying Yang Chendong, it also saved the lives of hundreds of thousands of soldiers and civilians. When the news first spread out from the city, when it came from the mouth of Infantry Division Commander Su Yuan, many of the soldiers and commoners in the city who heard this news all shed tears. Most of them joined Yang Xie's big family later, but even so, they still enjoyed many benefits. They originally thought that their lives would change greatly and become better and better, but the sudden appearance of Baiming's army shattered all their fantasies. Now, they had returned to Baiming and became Baiming's people. It was impossible to say that they didn't have any thoughts in their hearts. However, the situation was like this. Facing Baiming's army that was like a wolf and a tiger, what could they do? Were they really going to risk their lives? If that was the case, no one would be able to survive. Rong Shao acted very quickly. In just 5 days, he received a letter of guarantee written by Baiming's commander, Shiheng, agreeing to give up the 2 requirements. Shibi didn't act shamelessly after that. He took out the document that he had written long ago. It stated that the 2 cities, Shaojing and Jingzhou, would belong to Baiming from now on. They would leave the embrace of Yangxia, which was also Bugnam of Gojosian. After receiving the document, Rong Shao quickly announced it to the world and spread it widely. First city. In Yangxia City, which was the closest city to Shaojing City, the army commander, Tiger's Mane, immediately called for a military meeting when he saw the document written by Shibi. They reached a very unified goal, which was to absolutely not let this happen. They had to leave Shaojing City and give it to the new Second Army. No. Now, it should be said that the Baiming army was powerful and let them know that betraying Bugnam of Gojosian would definitely not end well. The one who led the troops was Ma Xiongxan, the commander of the new First Army's light cavalry regiment. As a light cavalry regiment, their advantage was that they were fast enough. They could be described as coming and going like the wind. With such an advantage, even if they encountered danger, they had a great chance to escape. Unfortunately, they went out with a face of anger. However, not long after they left the first city, they met Fang Dingshan, who had been waiting here for a long time. Fang Dingshan led the Liaodong Iron Cavalry, which had expanded to 70,000 people, and set up a formation. It was as if as long as they rushed over, they would kill all of them. Although Ma Xiangshan was very angry, considering the comparison of the forces of both sides and the fact that the Liaodong Iron Cavalry was also an elite cavalry force, in the end, his rationality prevailed over the anger in his heart. He had to order the army to retreat and return to the first city behind him. Without the external force, Shajing City and Jingzhou City fell into the hands of the Baiming army as they wished. In order to achieve the goal of completely controlling these two cities, the Baiming commander Shi Heng, who was now in charge of the security of this area, ordered more than 100,000 Baiming army to enter the two cities. In addition, Su Yuan's infantry division was firmly on the side of Baiming. At this moment, the advantage of the military strength fell into the hands of Baiming. After the fall of the two cities, especially after the 100,000 Baiming army entered, they were not people who followed the rules. Gradually, there were some incidents of burning and looting. Perhaps it was because their military pay was too low, and there were many good things in the two cities. Under the greed, there were many open robberies. In just a single day's time, more than 10 shops were robbed, over 100 women were taken, and several dozen commoners were killed on the streets. Because of this, he was extremely unhappy. He wrote a letter to Commander Shi Heng, expressing the resentment in his heart. Unfortunately, even if Shi Heng personally stepped in, he could only control the situation from worsening. As for the Baiming soldiers who robbed and killed before, none of them were punished. Obviously, Baiming had used a compromise. They did not want to anger Shibi and cause a mutiny among the 3 cavalry divisions of the new Second Army, but they also did not want to hurt the morale of their own soldiers. Naturally, Shibi was not happy about this. However, he did not expect that his guard captain, Wuxia, would actually ride out of the manor alone in a fit of anger. He charged into the northern Ming military camp in broad daylight and found a few criminals. The northern Ming soldiers who had killed the commoners did not say a word and killed them with a saber. Wu Xiaoyi's actions naturally attracted the anger of the other Baiming soldiers. After being surrounded, he was finally captured alive. Then, the matter was reported to Shibi. Shibi was still living in the city lord's mansion and did not seem to have been stripped of any power. However, when Rong Shao and Su Yuan appeared here again, their expressions were clearly much more arrogant than before. In the past, they had come to ask for help. However, this time, they came to denounce them, so their aura was naturally different. In the hall, Rong Shao questioned Shibi. He said that because of guard captain Wu Xiaoyi, 4 Baiming soldiers had died. This matter had caused the army to be extremely dissatisfied, and an explanation had to be given. Explanation? What explanation? You promised me before that you would not harm the people in the city. What did you do? Guard Captain Wu only acted out of indignation. You can say that he was willing to do so. Shibi naturally would not allow the other party to criticize him and took the initiative to counterattack. Even if you are dissatisfied, you can't just casually charge into the army camp and kill people. If you don't follow the rules, how can we explain this to the soldiers? Therefore, Wu Xiaoyi must die. Of course, we were also in the wrong before. How about this? General Shibi will personally deal with Wu Xiaoyi. This can be considered as us giving you face. Furthermore, we can guarantee that no one will harass the people in the city in the future. Rong Shao had already thought of what to say. At this moment, he appeared to be awe-inspiring and righteous. However, they did not kill Wu Xiaoyi and instead handed him over to Shibi for him to kill. This action was truly too sinister. Hearing this, Shibi's eyes flashed with uncontrollable anger. Just as he was about to say something, Rong Shao spoke again. General Shi, don't forget that we agreed before. If someone rebels, then we have the authority to deal with them. Your guard captain actually charged into our Baiming army to kill people. Isn't that no different from a rebellion? Of course, if you can't be ruthless enough to deal with him, then you can hand him over to our army. However, I'm afraid that if we do that, Wuxia will suffer even more. This was a threat. However, Shibi could not say anything. Who told Wuxia to be so impulsive? In order to prevent the people in the city from being bullied and for the security of the two cities to return to peace, Shibi had no choice but to agree. Tears flowed from the corners of her eyes as she said, "All right, we'll do as you say." Very good. Shibi finally compromised. All of this fell into Rong Xiao's eyes and made him very happy. He believed that once the news of Wu Xiaoyi being killed by Shibi spread, this new second army commander's authority would be suppressed to the lowest level. At that time, even if he had any disloyalty, he would not be able to stir up any waves. Not long after Rong Xiao left, Wu Xiaoyi was sent to the city lord's manor. Following him was the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division, Kong Ji. He knelt on the ground and pleaded with the other guards, namely Shibi's personal guards. Chapter 1134. Although Shibi couldn't bear all of this, he still issued the order to execute Wu Xiaoyi in the end. The execution was carried out in the courtyard of the city lord's mansion. Present were Shibi, Kong Ji, a group of personal guards, and several supervisors sent by the Baiming army. Shibi's eyes were filled with tears, and he shouted the word "kill" in pain. After laughing, Wu Xiaoyi's head fell to the ground. When the news spread out, the whole city was in an uproar. Everyone felt that there was no hope for the future. Because of this matter, Shibi also developed a grudge with Kong Ji and the other 2 cavalry division commanders. It was said that even if it was his order, the 3 division commanders began to resist. Rong Xiao heard this news in the mansion in the city. Of course, he was very satisfied. He believed that it wouldn't be long before there was internal strife among Shibi and the others. That would be the time to deal with these high-level figures. At that time, it would be the time for them to send people to seize the military power. Shaojing and Jingzhou seemed to have calmed down. As time passed, when the morale of the army and the people's hearts were slack, they would completely belong to Baiming. And for all of this, the 5-star army didn't seem to do anything, especially the first city. It seemed that they couldn't even protect themselves because after dealing with Shaojing and Jingzhou, hundreds of thousands of Baiming troops began to surround the first city. An even bigger storm seemed to be about to begin. The new, Gondusi area had now been renamed Liaodong by Zhu Qiyu. In the sea town of the Twin City Guard, which was the town that Yang Chendong first came to when he attacked the grassland, it was very lively at the moment. Countless 5-star army came ashore from here. They disguised themselves as Baiming sea soldiers and entered the town with lightning speed. When the 200 Baiming soldiers guarding the town realized that something was wrong, they were already on the chopping block. The army that appeared here was the 5-star army led by Yang Chendong. Moreover, it was the main force of the army. For example, the army that came along this time was the 4th Army Division, the 1st Cavalry Division, and the new army. In addition, there were also 30,000 C-ranked soldiers transferred from Korea. The 3 divisions of the 4th Army Division had been deployed from the war against the Japanese Empire, and they were only the first batch. Following closely behind them were even more troops that had retreated from the battlefield of the Japanese Empire. As the vanguard troops, these 3 troops became Yang Chendong's fist forces. Their mission was to open a new passage here that led to the origin city from the outside world. In the past, Liaodong region was part of Baiming's territory. Even if Yang Chendong had any ideas, he would have suppressed them because of the general situation. But now, they had already targeted the new Second Army. What was there to hesitate about? It was impolite not to reciprocate. Yang Chendong was not a person who would not retaliate. Compared to other people, he was originally a vengeful person. It was just that many times, the time was not ripe, and some of his ideas had not been formed yet. Looking at Baiming now, Korea and the Japanese Empire had been included in Yang Xie's territory. At this time, Yang Chendong did not have so many concerns. Not to mention, this time, Baiming had provoked him first. Even if he fought back, it could be considered that he had a legitimate reason. Sea Town became Yang Chendong's first gate when he entered this place. It had to be said that northern Ming was also filled with talents. Furthermore, this place was very close to the coast. It wasn't that no one had considered the possibility of the five-star army suddenly making a move. Although the probability of this happening was too small in many people's eyes, the nearby city guard still arranged for 200 people to be stationed here. They also prepared enough beacon towers to ensure that if there was an emergency, they would be able to warn the other cities and city guards in advance, giving them enough time to prepare. But obviously, they had miscalculated again. With regards to the situation here, the Yang faction's intelligence department had already investigated thoroughly. They captured Song Yong alive and detained all of the Northern Bright Sea Division so that they could send their army here without attracting any attention. Now it seemed that this first step was right. At least, the Baiming army outside Sea Town had not discovered them yet. Young master, what should we do next? Beta Persei stood beside Yang Chendong with his hand holding the hilt of his sword. There was some excitement on his face. Previously, when they were in the Japanese Empire, they had heard that Baiming had attacked the grassland and surrounded the two cities of Shaojing and Jingzhou. It was only because the Japanese Empire's war at that time that they really did not have the spare energy to take care of this place that the Baiming army had been arrogant for a few days. Now that the war in the Japanese Empire had finally ended, it was naturally time for them to take revenge. It could be said that Yang Er and the other warriors were filled with anger when they came here. Their first opponent was only around 200 people, and they had come here in the form of a surprise attack. This number of enemies was really not enough to fight, not enough to look at. Hearing Beta Persei's question, Division Commander Ling Daqiang, Division Commander Tian Hu, and Commander Su He all looked at Yang Chendong with shining eyes. Yang Chendong, who had already changed into a black armor, was now riding on the white dragon, looking into the distance thoughtfully. This was not the first time he had appeared in Sea Town, but compared to before, the pressure on him this time was obviously greater. It was not for anything else, but because his opponent this time was Baiming, the so-called orthodox in the eyes of the world. Even if the great Ming dynasty was divided into two, Baiming's power could not be underestimated. The intelligence department showed that the other side had an army of more than 4 million soldiers, and this was not enough. They were still expanding, and this number alone was not easy to deal with. Not to mention, Yang Chendong still had so many family members and businesses in the capital of Baiming. Perhaps if his business was gone, he could start again, if his money was gone, he could earn it again, but if his family members were gone, then it would be too late for Yang Chendong to regret. Fortunately, Baiming did not seem to have any intention of falling out with Yang Chendong. At least from the intelligence department's information, his family members were not targeted by Baiming, and even his business was still running. Thinking about it, Yang Chendong was not only Baiming's enemy, but also the enemy of the southern Ming dynasty and the kingdom of Juarez Yeshen. Moreover, he was so powerful that Baiming had to go all out to fight with him. If both sides suffered heavy losses, even if they won, it would be a Pyrrhic victory. At that time, it would only give their opponent an opportunity. This was also the reason why Baiming did not want to fall out with Yang Chendong. They only wanted to eliminate Yang Xie's forces around them, and then vigorously develop themselves. But even if it was this request, Yang Chendong would not easily agree. The grasslands were not Baiming's sphere of influence to begin with. Everything in the first city was obtained by Yang Chendong and his brothers step by step. Why, seeing that the meat was fat enough, now you want to kill it to satisfy your cravings? How could there be such a good thing in the world? From the moment he appeared here, Yang Chendong was already prepared to fall out with Bai Ming. The only difference was to what extent he would fall out with them in the end. Now that Beta Persei asked, he naturally would not be polite. He nodded lightly and said, "The next step is naturally to fight. Since someone has snatched 2 of our cities and dealt with one of our armies, then we will return the favor tenfold. Men, bring me the map." As soon as he finished speaking, Long Wei quickly sent the map to Yang Chendong. Then, he pointed to the Shuangqing guards closest to Sea Town and said, "Commander Ling, take your 4th division and set off from here. First, capture this city. Remember, it's best if you don't hurt anyone. Then, follow me to the Terran area." "Yes." The commander of the 4th division, Ling Daqiang, immediately stood at attention and said with a happy expression. This was equivalent to the first battle, and this was handed over to Ling Feng. This was enough to prove the 6th young master's trust in them. Yang Chendong pointed to many places on the map one after another, then looked at Su He and asked in a deep voice, "Commander Su, from Shuangqing guards to the west, the Ajulan guards, the Tun guards, the Fuyu guards, the Duo Yen guards, all the way to the Wonan River guards, as well as a large area in the north. I'll leave it all to you. Do you have the confidence to take them down one by one?" Su He's face was solemn, but his expression showed that he was extremely excited. He immediately stood at attention and said, "Please rest assured, Bugnam of Gojoseon. Our new army promises to complete the mission." "Very good." Yang Chendong nodded in satisfaction. Finally, his gaze fell on Tianhu and said, "With all the targets of the new army as a front line, this will be your defense area. In short, no reinforcements from Bai Ming are allowed to set foot here. If one appears, you will defeat it. Do you have a problem?" "No problem." Tianhu promised. As the number 1 cavalry unit, the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division, their mobility had always been the strongest. They were the most suitable to intercept reinforcements. The 3 capable generals had divided the work. The moment Yang Chendong ordered people to put away the map, he looked forward with bright eyes and said, "Very good. Since that's the case, everyone go and prepare. We will set off in 4 hours. Do not slack off." With the order, Yang Chendong's first initiative to mobilize troops against Bai Ming officially began. This also meant that Yang Chendong had enough confidence to compete with Bai Ming for the world. After the end of the naval battle, the land battle officially began. Shuangqing guards Qianhu Hiying. He was currently resting in his mansion in Shuangqing. He didn't feel that the war had begun and that he was in danger. This couldn't be blamed on him. Since Bai Ming began to vigorously develop their military, the status of the soldiers had increased a lot. Especially with the establishment of the Liaodong cavalry, many of the troublemakers in this area were recruited. Without those troublemakers causing trouble, Hiying felt that the security was a lot better. Therefore, during this period of time, he was very comfortable as a Qianhu. After dinner, he would hug his new concubine and sleep soundly in the room. It was really a happy thing in the world. It was wonderful. Chapter 1135. But as the saying goes, when a person sits at home, misfortune will come from the heavens. The sky had completely darkened, and the twin city guards, which was not very large, had also sunk into a state of silence. However, outside the He mansion, there was a series of urgent knocks on the door, causing many people in the mansion to be awakened. No matter what, Hiying was still a general, so he was still somewhat vigilant. The knocks on the door also woke him up, but the long period of peace did not make him think too much. Instead, he could not help but shout outside. "What's going on? Who's knocking on the door? Why aren't you going to take a look?" Without needing He Ying's orders, the door was already opened. Following that, a military commander rushed into the residence and quickly arrived at He Ying's door. With an urgent voice, he said, "Sir, there's someone knocking on the city gates. The person claims to be Navy General Song Yong. Our brothers are not sure, please make a decision. Song Yong? A cry of surprise came from within the room. He Ying had naturally heard of this newly promoted Navy general before. Not only that, he had even seen this person before. But because the difference in status between the two of them was too great, they did not have a deep relationship. Song Yong was here, this made He Ying feel a little confused. No matter what, the other party was a Navy general with 50,000 soldiers. He was just a small Jianghu with 1,120 soldiers. The two of them were on the same level, why would the other party come to his small twin city guards? His heart was filled with confusion, but He Ying did not dare to delay. He hurriedly put on his clothes and walked out of the room. When he saw the commander who came to report, he could not help but ask suspiciously, "Is it really General Song who came? Did you see clearly?" "This. Sir, we are of lowly status, how could we know such a big figure like General Song? We are really not sure, that's why we asked Sir to make a decision," the commander said with a troubled expression. He Ying thought that his words made sense and nodded. Then, he arrogantly raised his head and walked towards the gates of the residence. As he walked, he said, "That's right, with your status, you naturally do not know General Song, but I do. Come, follow me to take a look." Under the admiring gaze of the Zongqi, He Ying left the manor and arrived at the South City Gate under the protection of several bodyguards. At this moment, more than 100 Baiming soldiers had gathered here. They were all in charge of guarding the place. When they heard that a naval general had arrived, they gathered around out of curiosity. After seeing the arrival of the Jianghu, everyone moved aside, allowing He Ying to smoothly walk up to the top of the tower. Then, with the help of the torches downstairs, who else could it be but Song Yong on a horse downstairs? Seeing that it was really Song Yong, He Ying was very surprised. "General Song, didn't you lead the navy to attack the Japanese Empire? Why would he suddenly appear here? Who are you?" Song Yong, who was riding on his horse, asked when he heard someone call out to him. "General Song, I am the Jianghu of the Twin City Guards, He Ying." Since there was such an opportunity, He Ying naturally wanted to introduce himself. He Ying wanted to establish a good relationship, but Song Yong was impatient and shouted, "So it's Jianghu he. But since you know this general, why don't you open the gates? Are you going to refuse to let Shengguan through the gates?" Instead of answering directly, he scolded. Unfortunately, there were people who fell for this trick. For example, He Ying was such a person. When he heard Song Yong scolding him, he quickly apologized and said to the soldiers beside him, "What are you all standing there for? Hurry up and open the gates." Naturally, no one dared to disobey He Ying's orders. Soon, there was the sound of the gates being opened. Then, there was the sound of horse hooves, and more black figures entered through the gates. At this moment, He Ying had already descended from the tower and was ready to welcome General Song Yong. However, when he descended from the tower, he was greeted with countless guns and arrows. Needless to say, this was the work of the soldiers of the 4th Infantry Division. With someone like Song Yong leading the way, the Twin City Guards did not even need to fire a single shot. Logically speaking, Yang Chendong could have chosen to launch a night attack. With the soldiers of the 4th Infantry Division, climbing up the walls of the Twin City Guards was not a problem. It was just that he didn't want to make a move on the Han people, and he also needed to preserve the 2 city guards. Because this place would become the Yang faction's logistics base for a period of time, a lot of money and food sent from the sea would be temporarily stored here, so in the end, he chose to let Song Yong stand out and make a contribution. He Ying was just a small Jianghu. According to the intelligence department, this person bullied the common people all year round and was not a good person. Yang Chendong did not even have the intention to meet him and directly handed him over to the 4th Infantry Division's Ling Daqiang. He has lived here for a long time. He must be very familiar with the situation in Liaodong. Open his mouth and let him know something beneficial to us. Don't worry, sixth young master. A smile flashed across Ling Daqiang's face. After agreeing, he turned around and left. Pass down the order, no soldiers are to disturb the people. At the same time, put up a notice saying that I, Bugnam of Gojoseon, have come. As long as the people here cooperate with us, they can receive money at any time. You can go and do this. Yang Chendong looked at Beta Persei who was following beside him and assigned tasks. Young master, please don't do that. After following Yang Chendong for a long time, Beta Persei knew his young master's feelings for the Han people. He also worked as a logistics division commander for a period of time. Beta Persei was naturally familiar with this small matter. Thus, half an hour later, there were many notices on the walls of the Shuangqing Guard Central City. A large number of people who were originally in a state of panic gathered to watch. Some literate scholars read the notices, and the other people knew that the one who came was King Wunan of Damyang. The reason why they wanted to occupy this place was because when Bugnam of Gojoseon made a move against the Japanese Empire, his rear, the grassland, was attacked by Baiming. Now that the Japanese Empire was dealt with and became a province of the Five-Star Army, Bugnam of Gojoseon appeared in Liaodong. This time, he came to give those who wanted to deal with him a look. The notice also emphasized that they only wanted to deal with those who opposed them. As for the ordinary people, they would not offend them in the slightest. Once a soldier violated the rules, the people could go to the yamen at any time to report it. Once it was verified, not only would it be dealt with, the person who reported it would also be given a certain amount of silver as a reward. At the end of the notice, it was written, "Next, the Five-Star Army will send a large number of military supplies here. They will be transported in all directions from the Shuangqing Guard Central City. A lot of labor will be needed. As long as the people are willing to participate, they will be distributed according to their labor. Based on preliminary calculations, a strong man could earn 1 tael of silver after working hard for a day. Even a capable woman could earn half a tael of silver." The notice that was posted quickly attracted a lot of discussion among the people. This was also Yang Chendong's request. He did not want to deceive the people. He wanted them to know what was going on outside and let them participate. This would give rise to a sense of ownership, and in the future, it would be twice the result with half the effort. The notice was written clearly enough, and as expected, it attracted all kinds of discussion among the people. So it was Bugnam of Gojoseon who came. I heard that he loves the people very much, especially us Han people. It seems that there is no need to worry. Yes, Bugnam of Gojoseon treats the people well. With him around, of course we are safe. But it says that Baiming is attacking Bugnam of Gojoseon's forces in the grasslands? What does this mean? Isn't Bugnam of Gojoseon our great Ming dynasty's Bugnam of Gojoseon? An honest-looking man in his 40s scratched his head as he spoke with a confused look on his face. In fact, it was not only this middle-aged man. Many people had the same expression. They lived in the Shuangqing Guard Central City all year round, and because the transportation was not developed, they did not know much about what was going on outside. Fortunately, there were some knowledgeable people in the crowd. They had traveled extensively, so they knew a bit more. Facing this question, they gave an explanation. What do you know? Some of the territories in the grasslands did not originally belong to our great Ming dynasty. That was the world of the Mongol cavalry. Their horses are like the wind, and their people are like ghosts. Wherever they go, they eat people without spitting out their bones. They are still nomads, and other than raising some livestock, they don't know how to do anything else. They don't even have any iron tools. In order to survive, they have set their sights on us, the Han people. They would often rob the Han people stationed there. Other than robbing things, sometimes they would even rob people. That is very abominable. This brother is right. Those Mongol cavalry are very vicious, especially in the recent years. Our great Ming dynasty has allowed them to do whatever they want, causing them to not know how to restrain themselves. Their actions have become even more vicious. I was also fortunate enough to go to the grasslands. I heard that it was because of the appearance of Bugnam of Gojoseon that those Mongol cavalry were defeated. Many grassland tribes were cleaned up because of this, and some were even destroyed. Yes, I went to the Jianghu Left Guard Central City a while ago. I heard from a friend there that there is a very magnificent city in the grasslands. There are countless Han people there, and they live very comfortably. That was built by Bugnam of Gojoseon. That friend also said that since Bugnam of Gojoseon was in the grasslands, the safety of the Han people was guaranteed. Who knows how many people there have worshipped Bugnam of Gojoseon in their homes, saying that they are thanking him. The few people spoke one after another and quickly told the story to everyone. Most of the Han people who did not know all of this before now knew that Bugnam of Gojoseon was actually so powerful. However, a problem appeared. An old scholar who was literate but had never traveled far asked with a puzzled expression, since Bugnam of Gojoseon is so powerful in the grasslands and has done so many things for our Han people, why is the Baiming imperial court looking for trouble with him? Chapter 1136. Seeing that it was the old scholar who spoke, someone at the side laughed. As expected of a scholar. Don't tell me you think that everyone in the world is a good person just because the books are all good people. Don't you know the phrase, a great achievement alters the emperor? That's right. Bugnam of Gojoseon is so powerful and powerful. How could he not alert the emperor? It's normal for him to take action to suppress them. Haven't all emperors been the same since ancient times? It's a pity that they chose Bugnam of Gojoseon to fight against the Japanese Empire. That's not right. No matter what, Bugnam of Gojoseon took care of the Japanese Empire for the good of the people. Xianxia wasn't very far from the sea. They were lucky enough to see the appearance of the Japanese bandits a few times. Although the Japanese didn't dare to really attack Baiming with their military strength at that time, they could still attack the periphery. After all, their navy was stronger than Baiming. It could be said that many of the people of Xianxia had suffered losses at the hands of the pirates. Now that they heard that Bugnam of Gojoseon had completely taken care of them, how could they not be happy? Discussions rose and fell like this. Some things that they did not know before were explained by everyone. Most of the people now understood. They also knew that Bugnam of Gojoseon sent out his troops because he was bullied. Furthermore, Bugnam of Gojoseon treated the Han people very well. After a round of discussion, they finally came to a conclusion. First, there was no need to panic. As long as they did not do anything extreme, Bugnam of Gojoseon would not do anything to them. Second, Bugnam of Gojoseon was in urgent need of labor. If anyone had the idea, they could give it a try. Even if they did not get paid in the end, they would only have wasted a day's effort. It was not a big loss. The people did not necessarily know right from wrong. Their knowledge was limited, and they did not care as much about the ownership of the imperial power as those who benefited from it. Just like what the commoners often said, no matter who became the emperor, they would still be them. There would not be any changes. Not to mention a border city like the Twin Cities Guard. It was impossible for the emperor to come here in his lifetime. He had never even seen it, so how could he talk about feelings? What the commoners really cared about was the benefits that they could obtain. Since the 5-star Army's notice said that as long as they worked for them, they would be able to receive money and the remuneration was so high, why not give it a try? Some of the commoners thought so, but others shook their heads and walked away. Since ancient times, it was impossible to take advantage of the royal family while working for them. Not to mention 1 tael of silver a day, even if it was 2 maces of silver a day, it would still be impossible. Would those officials and soldiers be so kind? Slowly, the crowd dispersed. Most of them were returning home, and only a few of them were heading towards the barracks. All of this fell into the eyes of Long Wei, who was observing everything from afar. When Long Wei saw it, the matter naturally reached Yang Chendong's ears, and he laughed heartily in response. Good, it's done. As long as one commoner is willing to try, there won't be any problems. Shang Yang's reform had gained the trust of the commoners by standing on a tree as a sign. Now, without standing on a tree as a sign, the commoners were willing to give it a try. How could it not work? Once they returned home with the silver, presumably the city would explode. Considering that the Twin Cities Guard was too small, Yang Chendong did not arrange for people to guide public opinion. If a stranger suddenly appeared, not only would their words not be believed, but it would also arouse everyone's vigilance. As a result, he let things develop naturally. Even if no one believed what the notice said, he would still use the method of standing on a tree as a sign to gain everyone's trust. Now, it seemed that there were still some daring people who were willing to try. There was no reason for the matter to not work. This was also the reason why Yang Chendong had set the reward so high. It must be known that in a place like the Twin Cities Guard, one tael of silver could do a lot of things. Striking while the iron was hot, and letting the commoners drink with the golden and silver cups, Yang Chendong said to Longwei Badeojiang, "Pass down the order. The soldiers who don't need to be trained will enter the homes of the commoners in the city and chop firewood and water for them. If they can do anything, inform Beta Persei to get some food for them." It was now the 3rd month of spring. In the south, it was already spring and flowers were blooming, but in the north, especially in the Liaodong region, the weather was still very cold. At night, it was common for the temperature to be 10 degrees below zero. From time to time, there would be heavy snow, as if to tell the commoners that winter was not completely over. For example, at noon today, it snowed. Although it was not very heavy, the streets and the courtyards of the commoners' homes were still covered with a layer of white. This gave the 5-star army a chance to show off. For a time, their figures were everywhere in the city. In the commoners' courtyards, the snow on the streets of the city was quickly swept away, revealing the originally black ground. At night, the commoners who had worked hard for most of the day walked out of the barracks with smiles on their faces. They did not show the slightest bit of exhaustion from working hard for the day. After working for most of the day, many of them had less than 1 tael of silver in their hands. This was because they did not work for a day. If they went early in the morning, they would definitely be able to earn 1 tael of silver. More importantly, working in the barracks, they were even provided with lunch. Although it was not very nutritious, just being able to fill their stomachs was enough. This already made them very satisfied. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was like New Year's. These commoners who had received benefits had already decided that they would go to the barracks to work tomorrow morning. Not only that, they would also call their friends to go with them. Everyone should earn money together. Just like this, when these people returned home, the city became lively again. When the white taels of silver were placed in front of everyone, their previous disbelief was swept away. Some people even regretted that they did not give it a try today. Of course, most of them had already decided that they would go to the barracks tomorrow morning. Not to mention 1 tael of silver a day, even half a tael a day was an extremely good thing. Since ancient times, there had been many ways to buy people's hearts, but there were not many that were as simple and straightforward as Yang Chendong's. History had already proven that as long as you were good to the commoners, they would recognize you. It was not impossible for them to even work for you. Just like now, the soldiers worked for the commoners, and the commoners worked for the barracks. In turn, they also received money. Who would object? The Twin City Guards, who had originally been somewhat nervous because of the city being occupied, quickly calmed down. Not only did they restore their previous order, but everyone was still beaming with joy. They were not affected at all by the fact that winter had not yet left and the weather was still cold. Their smiles seemed to be able to melt the snow. Taking down the twin city guards was only the first step in Yang Chendong's military operation to occupy the entire Liaodong region. Next, his gaze fell on the Yima River guards in the northeast. It was still the same. Song Yong took the lead and came at night. As long as the city gate was opened, everything would be much simpler. All of this was thanks to the Great Ming's official hierarchy. In front of a superior, a lower official generally did not have any authority to speak. As the commander of 50,000 naval troops, Song Yong's position in the military was not low. At least in the entire Liaodong region, there were very few people who could be higher than him. With him going out to open the city gate, it was always successful. The army was at the front, followed by 30,000 North Korean soldiers. Behind them, the commoners of Twin City drove carriages and were responsible for logistics. This reduced the pressure on the army, allowing them to fight forward wholeheartedly. They did not have to think about other things at all. Naturally, they were able to do things with twice the result with half the effort. Yang Chendong's plan went very smoothly. The new army, Su-he, did not hold them back. As soon as they appeared, they quickly took down the defenseless Ajulan guards and Tun guards. Then, they went straight for the Fuyu guards. There was no such thing as an airtight pants. Although the new army's movements were very fast, because of the heavy snow, the warhorses could not display their usual strength. In the end, a portion of the enemy managed to escape. Then, the news spread. The nearby guards finally knew that the five-star army had appeared in the Liaodong region. When the commander of the Jianghu left guards, Chen Dula, received the news that the five-star army had appeared in the Liaodong region, he turned pale with fright. This was a sudden situation that he did not expect at all. He ordered people to ask for help from the Beiming imperial court while he began to prepare his troops for war. The former Jianghu left guards had been taught a good lesson by Yang Chendong. The former commander Liang Xian and the former commander Tang Longtian had both died at the hands of the five-star army. Naturally, he, who had suffered a loss before, was cautious and prepared for battle. He knew the valiant fighting strength of the five-star army and had seen it more than once. Chen Dula still had lingering fear in his heart. He was even considering whether or not it was better to directly defend the city. However, the newly appointed commander Tong Long did not think this way. Just by hearing his name, Tong Long knew that he was not a Han person. Instead, he was a combination of the Nuzan clan and Han people. Because of his bloodline, he had shown that he was good at fighting since he was young. After he grew up, he worked hard to perform well. In addition to his family's support, he finally obtained the position of Commander Tong Long. This was a secondary grade 3 military official. Furthermore, Tong Long was still young, not even 30 years old. It could be said that his future was limitless. However, the bad thing was that the position of an official in the Great Ming Dynasty depended on seniority. So what if you were capable? Being young was your biggest weakness. Unless you could make a great contribution, you would have to wait if you wanted to be promoted. Some people could even wait for a few years, a decade, or a lifetime. Of course, the young Tong Long did not want to wait any longer. He urgently needed to prove himself. Originally, he was thinking about whether or not he should sign up for the Liaodong Iron Cavalry. After all, that army was now unhindered in the grassland. It was said that even the powerful five-star army was suppressed in the first city and did not dare to move. An army like this was the place where hot-blooded soldiers like him could realize their ambitions. However, before he could make any decision, the five-star army actually appeared in the Liaodong region. You're tuning in to the UnparalleledSwordWill YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.